The story begins with our main character, Gale Hamilton, a young man trying to make a list of items that will help him increase cooperation in his group. Suddenly, the group's leader, Cash Bilbor, called Gale out and announced that they would terminate his contract. Gale was stunned by this sudden decision. "I feel like the whole world is turning its back on me." He tried to talk to Cash and the others to clarify the situation, but only received rude and belittling responses. Gale cannot understand the reason behind Cash's actions and wonders why he was fired so unjustly. The other members of the group, Melissa, Luke and Norris, also sided with Cash and mocked Gale for thinking he was useless with his support class. They claim that Gale's tools are cursed, are just weird toys, and don't appreciate his contributions. With their status as S-rank adventurers, they believed they did not need a low-rank support mage like Gale. Gale reminded them that his curse tools had helped the group through many difficult missions and that he understood how to weaken curses. Gale reminded him that not all of his artifacts were consumables and brought up a necklace as an example. However, the other members of the group still think that Gale's items are strange and horrifying, and are worried when they see that he considers them normal. Cash then introduced Mora. New supporter replaces Gale. Members welcomed Mora warmly, expressing positivity about her, because she possesses buffing and nerfing skills. Gale begs for one more chance, stating that he has powerful curse tools that he has never used, hoping this will attract their attention. However, his words were just like wind blowing through his ears. They no longer care about him or his artifacts. Realizing that they did not value him, Gale felt betrayed, tears welling up in his eyes. Gale asked Cash if he was sure he hadn't made a mistake in sending him away. But Cash coldly replied that they didn't need him anymore. Feeling hurt and betrayed, Gale decides to leave and open a curse tool shop. He reflects on his time with the Wolf Pack, and realizes that despite always supporting them to the best of his ability as a support class, they never truly appreciated him and that he was completely overworked. Totally unpaid for the past month. When Gale looked at the group members, happily in joy, he remembered the strengthening curses he had placed on their equipment. Gale decided to lift the curses, knowing they wouldn't allow it if they found out. After the curse was lifted, Gale experienced pain, but felt relieved and full of strength. He realized that he had let others benefit from his enhancements, when they were actually reducing his own XP. Gale left the inn and walked around town, thinking about her options. He had no money but still had a collection of curse tools and no longer needed the party's equipment. Remembering the offer to open a curse tool shop, Gale began to see potential in this idea. Imagine the prospect of freedom and the satisfaction of running your own store. Meanwhile, back at the Silver Wolves, Cash declares that it's a relief not to have to deal with Gale's problems anymore. But immediately, many curse signs appeared above their heads, making them all feel weaker. The group began to panic and accused Gale of tampering with their equipment, regretting that they should have eliminated him sooner. Mora, the new support mage, heard the conversation, and while the members bickered about what to do if they saw Gale again, Norris even suggested violent intentions such as cutting off his fingers. However, Mora, the only one still conscious, started thinking more deeply. She realized that the group's strength may have depended on Gale's strengthening curses. Surprised by this possibility, Mora wondered if the group's strength was entirely due to Gale's curse tools. Melissa noticed Mora's expression and asked if she had a problem, then handed her a glass of water. Mora accepted, and thought further about the fact that a normal curse specialist couldn't power up others. If Gale's curse tool could truly do that, then this must be an incredibly powerful ability, far beyond what a normal cursor could possess. Even though there was some doubt, the other members didn't pay any attention. They continued to enjoy themselves and prepare for an S-rank quest, intending to prove their worth to the Adventurers Guild. They will have to defeat Behemoth, a disaster-level monster. The group cheered and raised their glasses in praise, confident that they could easily defeat Behemoth. Meanwhile, Mora doesn't feel like she belongs, and she's upset when she realizes that the remaining people still haven't seen the true power of Gale, the person they chased away, and the huge influence he had on the group's abilities. As for Gale, he went to meet a merchant to ask for advice about opening a stall. Gale expressed her desire to get a place at the central square of the capital rail. However, the merchant said the rent there was a bit high, and suggested that he go to the reception desk to register with the association first. When the merchant told Gale that the price to rent a place in the central square was 4 gold coins per day, he stood still for a moment, thinking about this number. And check how much money you have. He discovered that he only had 3 silver coins. Meaning he only had enough money to rent a booth on Market Street, which was much cheaper. Despite feeling disappointed, Gale decided that something was better than nothing. Gale brought his curse tools to Market Street and carefully laid them out, looking around the small area he had just purchased for his stall. The booth was somewhat shabby, but Gale believed it was adequate for her needs. He remembered the kindness of the merchant who gave him his first set of booth tools, shook his hand with emotion and thanked him. Now, it's time for Gale to start her business. He decided to sell all the remaining curse tools along with the interior decorations. However, the pricing confused him, because you've never sold anything before. Ultimately, Gale decided to set prices based on raw material costs. He displayed all the items on the stand, but they looked quite gloomy. Gale sensed something was wrong with this presentation. Meanwhile, the merchant returned with some documents that he had forgotten to give to Gale earlier. When looking over at Gale's booth, he shook his head and declared that such a layout was not good at all. Without hesitation, the merchant got to work, rearranging the items, and arranged the booth neatly and reasonably. Once completed, Gale's booth looked impressive. Makes me feel extremely grateful. The merchant advised Gale to remember that customers would be upset if they couldn't find what they wanted, and if the store couldn't sell, it would be difficult to stay open. With this advice, the merchant left, leaving Gale happy and feeling lucky to have met such a kind person after being looked down upon by the old group. Now, with the booth nicely decorated, Gale decided to get serious. He took out his beloved necklace. Know that sometimes sacrifices are needed, and put it on the booth for sale. He wondered what customers would think of these cursed items and whether they would accept them. However, Gale dismissed the negative thought and focused on the task at hand. He prepares himself and shouted loudly like a professional salesman. Introduced that he had items for adventurers with the ability to cause weakness. Extremely cheap price. Immediately, adventurers began to gather around the booth, curiously looking at the rare talismans he had for sale. Gale smiled and welcomed. Explains that cursed tools have their own advantages such as not consuming magic power and can be used by almost anyone. Hearing this benefit, more and more people came to see it. A customer saw a bottle of deadly poison being sold for only 5 copper coins and asked in surprise. Gale enthusiastically introduced it, explaining that the price was low because the manufacturing costs were almost negligible. He assures that he has many other unique items such as spells that cause negative status, curse tools that cause weakness, and more. Even though it's unclear how effective these items will be, customers still decide to buy them because the price is so affordable. Gale was pleased to have another successful transaction and encouraged the customer to come back next time. Another guest saw it, a cool-looking sword, and asked Gale about it. Gale reveals that it is an enchanted short sword, shocking the guest to learn that it is cursed, and assumed that no one would buy a cursed item. Gale tactfully responded that these items are perfect for interior decoration, as they give a cool and unique look. The customer, convinced by Gale's explanation, decided to buy a sword to ward off evil spirits from his house. Gale expressed her gratitude, and included some curse-relieving talismans. It's clear this guy was born to be an S-class salesman. Gale has a unique sales style where he always makes it clear to customers that the tools are cursed, and come with dispelling talismans. Free curse. Most of his customers are Death Metallica fans, interested in the bizarre and creepy design of these items. He continued to sell his enchanted boots. Then another customer approached and asked about a tool carrying a legendary legend. Testament to the power of cursed devices. Gale understands that the mere mention of curses is enough to make most people wary, so he always gives away dispelling charms and clearly explains the effects of curses and how to remove them. Soon, his shop was filled with a stream of customers eager to buy his curse tools, mainly because they were interested in free curse-relieving talismans. They are willing to pay to own tools with unique designs. Gale continued selling at a steady pace, and soon he sold all the items. He was quite surprised, seeing everything sold out in such a short time. Right after that, many people continued to flock to him, asking if his store was a place that sold items that came with free curse relief charms and if they were still in stock. Gale announced that he was out of stock. Makes customers quite disappointed. Gale realizes that the curse-relieving charm has become unexpectedly popular. When customers looked at him with longing eyes, he promised to return with the same booth in the same place tomorrow. Then quickly made an excuse to leave. Meanwhile, some of the people who bought curse tools from Gale began testing them. They bought these items as a way to prove that they were brave enough to overcome their fear of cursed items. A person tries on a ring and noticed a significant increase in my stats, with a system window popping up informing him that his power had been increased by 50%. Others also experimented with cursed items and were amazed at their powerful effects, to the point where they no longer hesitate to keep the curse, even though they have the ability to lift the curse if needed. An adventurer commented that it was expensive to remove curses at the temple, and they consider buying more curse-relieving charms from Gale to resell for profit. Another explorer advised everyone to keep these ideas to themselves, as the temple would not be pleased if they knew. They pointed out that the temple charges expensive gold coins for curse removal, and emphasized the talent of the cursebreaker they met. They talked that any guild would compete to have Gale on the team. Few people know that this talented curse breaker was once humiliated and abandoned by his own group. Now, Gale creates curse tools that contain S-class effects, but sells them at extremely cheap prices. Rumors began to spread throughout the Imperial City about a mysterious curse breaker who appeared briefly, sold cursed items, and then quickly disappeared. Gale, with this nickname, was completely unaware of the rumors or the S-rank power of the tools she created, content only because her wallet was heavy. Meanwhile, somewhere else, the members of the Wolfpack, Cash and the others, are participating in their S-rank mission. They had difficulty facing a monster, can easily block attacks without letting them touch it. Cash is confused as to why this happened to them, because this is completely absurd. He feels dissatisfied and has good reason to be so. Because they are S-class adventurers. Cash wondered why they were defeated by a goblin that had previously given no trouble and was usually easily taken down a few days ago. But when just a few hours ago, they received an S-rank mission, Melissa asked Cash if it was wise to immediately participate in a high-rank mission with the new member. Cash is confident that everything will be fine, because he personally chose Moca, who has a good reputation in the guild. This answer reassured the group somewhat, and they told Moca that they would rely on her. Moca felt a bit awkward but responded with a forced smile. Cash notices something wrong around them, and warned members to be prepared. Because there is a goblin in front of me. However, even though the group worked together, they couldn't take down a simple goblin. Luke's arrows were shot in the wrong direction, making him struggle to control them. Melissa yelled at Luke for his clumsiness in this intense battle. She decided to confront the goblin alone, but in the next moment, the goblin launched an attack. Sent Melissa flying and hit a tree. Cash didn't have time to react to the situation. So he turned around and ordered Norris to take this opportunity. However, Norris took longer than usual to cast the spell. And once completed, only a small weak spark appeared. Cash yelled at Norris for not being able to land a powerful magical attack, claiming that the weak fire didn't even tickle the goblin. Too focused on Norris, Cash forgot about the goblin. And at that moment, it rushed to attack him again. Luckily, Moca promptly pulled Cash out of range. Use your support magic to save him. Worried, she asked if Cash was okay. But instead of being grateful, Cash loudly scolded her for working at the wrong time, when she should have been focusing on strengthening the group. Moca explained that she had used all her strength to strengthen them throughout the match, even placed his wand on the ground, and use what little strength I have left to add another support spell to Cash. She announced that all of Cash's stats had been doubled and urged him to quickly destroy the goblins as this was only an easy challenge for S-rankers. Cash was happy to hear that his stats had been doubled, determined to destroy the goblins to satisfy his anger. Enthusiastically, he rushed forward to crush his opponent. When approaching the goblin, the monster struck, but Cash avoided it. Thinking I have the upper hand, he swung his sword and slashed at the goblin. But, unexpectedly, the goblin easily blocked Cash's sword like it was nothing. It started picking its nose, then lifted Cash up while he was still surprised by the blocked attack. Just then, with a powerful throw, the elf tossed Cash towards Moca. Moca quickly erected a protective barrier, blocking the goblin's next attack. However, Cash called Moca a complete failure as a support mage, despite her expertise in reinforcement magic. Cash constantly considers her useless because those spells don't seem to help him at all. Feeling blamed, Moca reiterated that he had asked her to hold back the enhancements for the battle with Behemoth. Moca declares there is no choice but to use the curse tool that Gale left her. She thought it could weaken the goblin considerably. In response, Cash immediately grabbed her collar, warning her not to use Gale's cursed items, because he believed that they would have no effect. Moca was angry. Recalling Gale's kindness in leaving a note to help her adjust to her new role in the group, records the Wolfpack's habits and also his letter of support for her. Gale also left behind some curse tools that she can use anytime she wants. Because he knew well that these cowards would not dare to confront monsters until she weakens them like he did before. Cash let go of Mora's collar and blamed everything on Gale. He told everyone that it was all Gale's fault and that the magic circle from yesterday was not a dispelling spell but a curse. Melissa, Norris and Luke agreed. They all thought that Gale was just a loser causing trouble for them. In the middle of the battle, they began arguing, mocking Gale as just being useless. Cash admitted that the road ahead would certainly be full of dangers, but he also did not want to retreat because he was too proud to be an S-rank adventurer. Melissa understood how he felt, while Norris reminded them that they couldn't even fight if they wanted to because of Gale's curse. They suggested fully recovering their strength before trying to fight again. Called it a strategic retreat, and saw it as the perfect opportunity to escape while the goblin hadn't noticed them yet. Cash agrees to temporarily give up and decides to retreat, continuing to blame the curse. Moca was stunned by their change in fighting spirit, trying to convince them to persevere, wondering if they were really a group of S-rank adventurers. Cash spoke, stating that the entire team was seriously injured after the match, while Moca was unharmed. She didn't understand what he meant until Cash explained that since she was a new member, she should also join the fight. They assigned Moca to guard the rear. Moca couldn't believe they would let a mage assist like her, who couldn't use any attack skills, stood facing the goblin. Currently, Moca was standing next to the goblin. And suddenly it asked her if she also had to endure such hardships. Changing the main character into this goblin would be great. In a panic, Moca quickly used the cursed scroll she had. In the next moment, the scroll began to glow. And she took the opportunity to run away. Meanwhile, the other members were resting by a tree, exhausted from the long escape. Melissa blamed the new girl, Moca, claiming she was useless to them. However, Luke points out that they themselves have become weak. But Melissa still blamed Moca, blaming her for flaunting her bust and distracting the group. Everyone ignored what she said and shifted the blame to Gale. At that moment, Moca arrived. And Cash praises her for successfully escaping the goblin. But then he noticed something small clinging to Mora's back. Thanks to Gale's curse, the goblin shrank and turned into a child. Meanwhile, in the city, Gale finds running her stall enjoyable, and hope that more people, not just adventurers, will buy his stuff. Recently, he met a strange adventurer who just stood looking at him with bloodshot eyes and burst into laughter. With the money she earned, Gale decided to move her stall to the noble district, to attract wealthier customers, and silently hope would never see that strange adventurer again. At the same time, a young lady came from a nearby street corner, was attentively observing his booth with interest. Moca Glarus finally escaped the goblin and headed towards the place where her old group of comrades had abandoned her. Moca returned looking tired and haggard. The group of old companions did not show any remorse for their actions. Melissa, always jealous, was angry that Moca was late and quipped that it was probably because of her large bust that made her run slow. The other members were indifferent, only suggesting to leave the forest as soon as possible. At that moment, Cash saw something crawling on Mora's robe. Is a mini version of the goblin. Then boom! The effect from the curse tool that Gale left behind took effect, and the goblin returned to its original size. Cash and the other members started yelling and blaming Moca, but she quickly left, leaving his old friends to face the giant monster. In panic, the group tried to hide behind each other to avoid the goblins. Luke even suggested that the elf eat Melissa because women are more delicious and softer. As they ran away, the goblin just stood there, silently thinking to himself that he was actually a vegetarian. 4 days later, the wolf pack appeared in a miserable state at an inn, seemingly exhausted, lying down on the table and weakly asking for water while some people just wanted to shower. The guests in the inn were looking at this group of smelly people with judgmental eyes, their foul smell spread everywhere, causing everyone to cover their noses. Moca sat at the counter, and the innkeeper curiously asked about her group, currently sitting at a table in the back. Still angry, Moca bluntly replied that they had gotten themselves into this situation. Cash called out to the innkeeper, demanding water, towels or whatever was available to them, while Luke complained that the service here was terrible. The owner responded by placing a single glass of water on the table, and told the 4 stinkers straight that she didn't run a charity place. Truly a quality counterattack. Cash was clearly mad at that statement, shouting that the owner didn't know who they were. In fact, she knew very well, and in her eyes, they were just a lazy bunch. Can't pay the bill. She informed them that their advance payment would only last until yesterday, and that if they did not pay more, she expected them to leave as soon as they finished their drinks. Cash struggled to find his wallet while muttering something about being an S-rank adventurer. After a while of rummaging, he realized that the wolf pack was completely bankrupt. Melissa took advantage of the opportunity, quickly drank the only glass of water the shop owner gave him, leaving 3 men screaming in anger. They turned to look at Moca, sitting at the counter waiting for food, with the intention of freeloading. Melissa roughly grabbed Moca, and Cash rummaged around her body looking for her wallet. Throughout that process, they kept blaming Gale for all the bad luck, even blaming him for causing them to go bankrupt. The 4 members of the team seemed satisfied with the money they had just stolen, but Moca was not easy to bully. She quickly punched Cash in the face, then deal with Melissa as well. And the remaining 2 worms are Luke and Norris. Moca knocked them down quickly, and clean up the mess for the innkeeper. This is also her way of saying a sweet goodbye to the Wolfpack team. She apologized for breaking the table and cups, but the owner was just happy to have gotten rid of the idiots. Back in town, Gale was enjoying every moment as she set up her stall in the middle of the noble district. He attracted countless wealthy customers curious about his masterpieces. His day began with a noble lady and bodyguards at his side. She bought Gale's lizard lamp, actually a basilisk, which looked strange but interesting. As the day dragged on, Gale sold quite a few. However, homemade combat equipment and items do not attract many people. Made him a bit sad because no one really appreciated his designs. Just as Gale was about to clear the counter, a beautiful lady, dressed simply, suddenly rushed in, made him stay a little longer. Gale was curious if she was a noble. Because it's clear, there was a bodyguard secretly watching her from afar. Gale noticed the girl. Looks like he's glowing with excitement. It's like being in your own cute stationery store. She bought a beautiful little ring and kept praising her, making Gale so moved that she wanted to cry. Gale intended to reduce the price because she was the first person to compliment his design. But she gave it to him, a large gold coin, and skip around, leaving Gale immersed in happiness. In her excitement, Gale forgot to give the curse-breaking charm for the ring she bought. Actually, it's not too big of a deal, it's just that the ring will increase defense and resistance to finishing blows immediately by 200%, but once worn, it cannot be removed. Anyway, she's rich so she can go to the temple to lift the curse. However, immediately after leaving, the girl was kidnapped by a female knight right in the alley and brought back to the palace. It turns out she is the kingdom's Princess Carla. Immediately, royal guards flooded the town. Look for a young man with black hair and a blue coat selling things in the market. The reason is because he dared to talk to the princess and even sell her strange things. Gale was almost discovered by the guards. But he quickly used a spell to turn his face into that of an old man. The guard passed by, apologized and continued the search. Quickly, Gale used a dispelling charm to erase the transformation. And decided to leave town immediately. For your safety. However, he is suddenly surrounded by curious children, who demand he perform magic because they saw him transform. While Gale was trying to convince them to shut up. At the Grand Palace, beautiful Princess Carla lies comfortably on a soft bed, next to the special ring she just bought from the young man. Female knight Vivian tries to remind Carla that buying cursed items is an insult to religion, but Carla doesn't care. For her, connecting with the people is essential as a princess. Vivian glanced at her sternly. Then his eyes stopped at the cursed items scattered throughout Carla's room. Carla feels that no one understands the appeal of these strange items like she does. Vivian just reminded that this morning Carla had a meeting with a delegation from a neighboring country and should prepare well. But Carla didn't hear anything because she was engrossed in putting the strange ring on her finger. Want to see how it looks when worn? At the Adventurers Guild. Gale is enjoying a delicious meal after a hard day's work. At first, he was worried about living alone, but so far, he's really enjoying it. It turned out that he had a talent for solo business and felt satisfied with doing his own business and eating alone at restaurants. He thought about stockpiling more ingredients soon. And perhaps it's time for him to prepare to leave for another city. As Gale put the food tray away, he encountered unexpected guests at the Adventurers Guild. Were his former team members, begging to borrow 10 to 20 gold coins because they were S-rank. But the girl in charge of the guild refused gently, explaining that they have not completed any missions since being promoted, which is completely unusual behavior for an S-rank team. Their team tried to come up with silly excuses, but couldn't cover up the truth. They had just failed to defeat an A-rank ogre, and had caused a lot of trouble in the town. Not only had Moca left the team, but a complaint had been filed against them, leaving them actually in debt. In the end, the receptionist firmly refused to lend them money, and it seemed like this failed team would not dare to ask for a loan again. Gale looked at that scene and found it pitiful and humorous. At that moment, the exploit team decided to blame Gale, saying he had cursed them, and Moca was completely useless as his replacement. Blaming others seems to have become their hobby. The receptionist immediately clarified to this group of idiots, Moca is one of the best support mages in the entire Citadel. It's a shame that she once introduced the Wolfpack as one of the best teams. This caused Gale to stand nearby, happily listening and enjoying each story that was happening. He felt satisfied when his old group received completely deserved criticism. The receptionist continued talking and suddenly gave Gale a compliment. She affirmed that he was a great curse maker, having created top-notch curse charms for the guild. Gale blushed at the compliment, while the Wolfpack left the guild in anger. Paranoid, they announced they would come back to pay that silly debt, and begin taking on easy missions, in order to break the curse they think Gale has placed on them. Watching them leave angrily, Gale actually found this situation a bit disturbing. How could they think he cursed them? Once Gale had completely lifted all his curses, he no longer had any connection with those abandoned people. However, he decided to leave the guild immediately, to avoid letting them vent their anger on him if they suddenly encountered him. Outside the guild, Gale overheard two royal guards, were hastily gossiping about the princess and Vivian getting into trouble again. It turned out that the princess was hiding under the blanket in fear, and Vivian panicked when she saw that the cursed ring could not be removed and emitted pitch-black energy. Even if she tried her best, the princess could not remove it. While about to welcome foreign delegations, at this time, Vivian came up with the idea of cutting off the princess' finger, causing Carla to scream in panic. Finally, the princess had to wrap her finger with a lovely ribbon, then entered the audience. When the delegation arrived, they carried a large gift box, including fine teas and cakes from their country. The princess was visibly excited, but something terrible happened when the gift box was opened. Beneath the layer of candy, a group of armored robbers emerged and suddenly shot arrows at the princess, intending to assassinate her. However, a miracle occurred and the princess was protected by a barrier emanating from Gale's ring, causing all the arrows and knives to fall to the ground. All the robbers were captured, and Princess Carla, still scared, taken to a safe place at Tintu Palace, a giant temple. Here, Carla and Vivian meet Father Uriel, a prayer Arizel, who is examining her ring. He was amazed by its power and had no difficulty lifting the curse, but was also impressed by the ring's excellent quality. The priest even said that its creator must be a master in the art of cursing. Unexpectedly, that master is distributing rings like candy all over town. The priest and the examiner could not help but admire this wonderful cursed item as they carefully analyzed each of its abilities. The ring made the princess immune to all assassination attempts, compared to the Empire's greatest treasures, such as the Demon King's heart. But even that treasure also consumes the user's energy. While this ring does not require anything and still possesses the best quality in the world, the princess wanted Vivian to bring the young man to her so that she could properly thank him. Vivian initially had the intention of cutting Gale to pieces, but after he saved the princess's life, that was no longer the case. Early in the morning, birdsong rang out, and Gale donned an impressive new outfit tailored at a luxury boutique in the city. He has a large cloak with pockets inside to hold various curse tools, iron gloves, armor with strong iron thread, and embroidered boots for carrying luggage. Gale had brought all the curse tools and even a homemade dagger. It's time for you to leave town. This may be the last time he sees the royal capital. Gale feels every breath of morning air, watching the city awakening and the residents starting their day. All of it had a special feeling for him. Suddenly, an alley caught Gale's attention. There was a group of 4 people trembling on the ground like beggars. For a moment, Gale thought that maybe those were her old teammates, but he quickly dismissed that thought and continued walking toward the city center. When he went into town, Gale was confronted by the city knights charging through town. They were clearly looking for a dirty-looking young man who was selling unsightly accessories, and he also had black hair. Definitely not Gale, because his accessories aren't unattractive, and he doesn't have a disheveled appearance either. Note, Gale really has no self-awareness at all. He even bumped into one of the knights and was immediately let go because he looked quite presentable. Gale panicked and decided to leave the city immediately. He blamed himself for being naive and reminiscing about this stupid city even for a moment. At this time of day, there are dozens of passenger cars. You just need to choose a city you want to go to. I want to go to a crowded place with many opportunities. But then something else caught his attention. Gale hears a man advertising fares to the farming town of Farm Edge. Just thinking about food and delicious produce is enough to make Gale's mouth water, so he decided to immediately go to Farm Edge. And he's not the only one. There was also a girl buying tickets. No one else. Sorceress assisting Moca Recap. Gale definitely recognized that beautiful face. But there is one problem that Gale shouldn't accidentally say what she thinks. Moca grabbed his collar, and Gale begged for forgiveness, saying he was just a normal person who deserved to be ignored. But Moca didn't let it go and gave him a memorable punch. Reiterates that he is no different from the rest of the wolf pack. Afterwards, the two sat next to each other in the car, and Moca wished Gale a good trip in an angry voice. Gale felt sleepy, but Moca kept pushing him away because he was sitting too close to her, even though Gale had nowhere to sit. Because the car was full of iron and steel and imported goods, there were only a few seats left for passengers. Unable to contain her curiosity, Gale asked Moca how she felt about the wolf pack's situation. She replied indifferently, without any emotion, while Gale still feels betrayed. Moca frankly said that she didn't understand why he stayed in that terrible group for so long. She talked about Cash not being able to defeat a goblin. Shocking Gale. Because he never realized he had such an influence on the group, Moca couldn't believe how Cash could become the leader with such poor fighting skills, and the other 3 were no better, unable to hold a sword, cast magic or shoot an archery properly. She just had the bad luck to join such an incompetent group. Gale fell into thought for a moment. He used to think Cash was a hero, but now he realizes Cash is just a lousy loser. Moca adds that every time something goes wrong, the wolf pack blames Gale and criticizes him. She talked about standing on the sidelines and listening to the group's words, but then quickly fell silent, thinking that perhaps Gale didn't want to mention it. However, Gale only gently apologized to Moca for the trouble his old group caused her. The car continued to roll on the rough road, and Gale looked over at Moca, noticing she didn't have much food or supplies. He decided to open his backpack and suddenly brought out a miniature kitchen with bread, delicious cabbage and meat to prepare a delicious sandwich. Gale invites Moca. She accepted immediately, because the dish looks so attractive. He also did not forget to share the cake with the family of 3 sitting in front. Then, Gale took out a bottle of delicious wine, and everyone enjoyed the meal with joy. While eating, he told Moca about his stall and about the chaotic market before he left, where everyone was buzzing due to rumors of a relic-level item appearing at a certain stall. There, Gale wondered how someone could sell such a wonderful item without realizing that it was him. Once again, his lack of self-awareness appeared. The counter and the relic actually belonged to him, but he decided to keep this a secret from Moca. After a few glasses of wine and happy laughter, the cargo truck suddenly overturned. Everyone in the car fell down in odd positions, and it took a while to grasp the situation. An orc attack suddenly hit the carts. The mercenaries and passengers all thought this was the end, and a child started sobbing. None of the passengers had combat experience other than Gale and Moca, but both were only remote support, having never fought directly. However, they had no other choice but to participate in the match. Moca held a staff and a small knife, and Gale has some consumables and a dagger. Although it is not an ideal weapon, it will temporarily suffice in this urgent situation. Gale tried to stop Moca from stepping forward because they weren't frontline warriors. Deciding to fight is a reckless choice, but he decided to trust Moca. He moved forward and asked her to protect his rear. Since the orcs did not expect a counterattack, Gale decided that a vanguard would be the best option. He quickly built a barrier, and Moca immediately prepared to buff him. She pulled out her staff, and the moment Gale drew her dagger, a stream of dark energy filled the surrounding space. Gale simply pointed the dagger at the orcs, and the dark energy began to swirl around him. For the first time, the never-before-seen potential of Gale's power was about to be unleashed. Moca felt an intense blast of cursed energy radiating from the dagger that Gale was pointing at the orcs. He appeared confident and didn't seem to need any support. Moca remembered the conversation from earlier, when she said that the buff took time to activate, and she planned to find the right time to buff Gale. Once the buff took effect, Gale would be strong enough to defeat 1 or even 2 ogres according to their plan. Gale used the curse tool to slow down the orcs and kill as many as possible before they regained their strength. He agreed to the plan, admitting that if he could buy enough time, the plan would be extremely effective. Moca reminds them that they only have one chance. However, upon witnessing the dark aura emanating from the dagger, Moca couldn't help but wonder about its true nature. Gale explained that it was just a normal dagger used for debuffs, surprising Moca, who didn't understand how he could consider such a thing normal. Gale, always carefree, simply asked her to continue protecting his back. Determined, Moca began casting buff spells. She knew that this magical effect only lasted for a short time, so she decided to use Omni Boost, causing Gale to feel a strong increase in power. Meanwhile, Gale skillfully tossed a scroll among the orcs. Aiming very precisely, the talisman scroll fell exactly where he intended. When the scroll opens, a dark aura appears, covers the orcs, causing them to immediately feel a horrifying weight and pressure. Sweat poured down their bodies, and the surrounding space seemed to turn into a real hell. Even Moca could sense the deadly aura of this gloomy aura. The orcs could not resist the terrible pressure, kneeling to the ground in terror. Moca was amazed at the incredible power of the curse tool that Gale had just used. She realized that Gale's buffing ability was far beyond what she had thought. Even though the curse only affected monsters, she still felt tense, afraid that he might be cursed if he wasn't careful in battle. Still, Gale decided that it was time to finish off the orcs. Moca tries to warn that the buff effect hasn't fully kicked in yet, but he still rushed forward with the dagger in his hand. In the blink of an eye, Gale quickly approached the target. Sharp eyes locked on the neck of an orc. Moca is worried because Gale doesn't have buffs, but she was completely dumbfounded. "When I saw you single-handedly take down the orc, its head soared into the air. But Gale doesn't need any buffs." He quickly rushed at the next scared orc, and easily cut it in half with the cursed dagger. Gale laughed, amazed at her new power, and thanked Moca, claiming it was all thanks to her buff. Moca was bewildered, because she actually never buffed him. She gradually realizes that Gale's curse tools go far beyond simply weakening her opponents. It instills fear, lowers defenses, and can even paralyze enemies. The power of this tool was beyond anything she had ever known. the dagger that Gale held in her hand. Not only does he possess 2 auto-buff abilities, allowing him to ignore defenses and avoid detection traps, but also a legendary magical weapon. However, Gale's carefree, indifferent attitude towards this extraordinary power makes Moca angry. Perhaps, to keep our spirits up, we should assume that Gale cursed herself by trading 90% of her IQ to possess the ultimate curse skill. Suddenly, Gale began to glow. When Moca's buff finally took effect, pushing his stats up, he was excited about the fact that he was being buffed by a top support mage. Moca tried to correct that he did everything himself. But Gale confidently believes that with both of their strengths, they can defeat any opponent. Moca becomes increasingly worried by Gale's behavior. But he continued to enjoy the power, slaying the orcs like he was swatting flies. As they took down another orc, they noticed more larger and stronger orcs suddenly appearing. Gale was stunned by their sudden appearance. To deal with the new threat, he threw curse vials at the orcs. When the vials collide, the curse effect spreads, making the orcs unable to move. Without hesitation, Gale continued to cut down the orcs at their slow pace, both doing and being surprised at the opponent's slowness. Moca understood that these effects were not due to her buffs, but Gale still believed that it was because of her. His naivety both impressed and annoyed her, because reducing an opponent's speed by 90% was clearly more than just slowing down the enemy. The surprises haven't stopped yet. Moca was shocked when she saw it. Gale approached an orc from behind, and a terrifying murderous aura emanated from his knife. With just a light touch, the orc's neck was severed, and it collapsed to the ground lifeless. Moca realized this was the effect of a super rare skill called Instant Slash, usually only appears in large weapons. Gale wiped the blood from her face, while Moca still couldn't shake the creepy feeling from his aura. He looked at her, causing Moca to immediately take a defensive stance. Clearly, Gale is a formidable warrior. But then he suddenly smiled, a bright smile, making Moca confused. Turns out, this guy is just a harmless ball full of light. Moca still didn't know how to react to Gale's lack of awareness. While he excitedly danced and held her hand, praising her support magic warmly, Moca just rolled her eyes and accepted the compliment. The passengers on the carriage approached them. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Gale and Moca were safe, while the corpses of the orcs were scattered around. They expressed their deep gratitude. At night, everyone gathered around the fire. And Gale confides in Moca that this is his first time facing a monster. He admitted that he felt scared at first, but Moca couldn't understand his fear, because he seemed so happy when fighting. Gale explains that, despite being part of Cash's group from the beginning, he never had the chance to fight directly. For being just a curse maker. Moca realized that Gale did not appreciate his own talents, or perhaps he was not aware of his true abilities. She tried to reassure him, emphasizing his talent, and also praised the coffee he brewed as delicious. However, Gale just laughed and brushed it off. Even though I know I'm good at many things, he always chose to focus on his negative points. Welcome to another episode of the protagonist's self-awareness challenge, Mission Impossible. Admittedly, because she had been used and despised for so long, Gale had really accepted that she was no good at all. That's really sad. Anyway, it's time for bed, and Moca thanks Gale for the coffee, reminding him to rest for tomorrow. Gale said goodnight to Moca and sat down by the fire, looking at the grateful faces of the people he had just saved. He feels happy when he can help people. And turned my gaze to the starry night sky, satisfied with the words of encouragement he received. Before now, Gale had never thought of herself that way, and still believes it's all thanks to Moca's magic. I remember the days when I just stood on the sidelines. No chance to fight monsters. And now, the happiness of defeating them made him constantly laugh alone, experiencing new emotions that he had never had before. I truly believe that Moca is a kind and trustworthy person, while Moca only felt sorry for his lack of self-awareness. A new day passed, and the driver announced to everyone that they were almost at their destination. Not long after, they arrived at the gates of Farm Edge Town. Gale and Moca got out of the car. With a feeling of relief, finally arrived in town. It marks the beginning of their new adventures across the sprawling farms. Lovely little houses, and fields filled with cattle. Since the horse-drawn carriage could not go all the way because of the rough roads, the two had to continue walking, admiring the beautiful agricultural scenery stretching around. Moca asked Gale about his plans. Gale shared that he intended to stop by the guild to exchange the orc materials they had collected for some much-needed money. He also mentioned that he would take the opportunity to see if there were any suitable tasks. During the discussion, Moca suggested checking to see if there were any groups looking to recruit members, but Gale expressed a desire to enjoy some freedom for a while, confident that he could find a suitable hunting spot. With the decision made, the two headed to the Adventurers Guild. Inside the guild, Gale chooses a mission, making Moca worry if he can handle the dangerous challenges on his own. Gale smiled reassuringly, assuring her that he would be okay. Moca tries to convince Gale to reconsider, but he responds by inviting her to join him on the zombie extermination mission. Although unsure about going on such a dangerous mission, Moca reminded them that they were both support and worried if they could handle it as smoothly as they did when dealing with the orcs. Gale, frustrated by her hesitation, asked Moca to simply observe, claiming that missions like this were his forte. Determined to prove herself, Gale accepts the mission. Just as the two finished planning, Guildmaster Gimli stepped forward. Gale and Moca turned to pay attention to her, noticing Gale's fresh face. Gimli asked if he was new to the area. Gale admitted that she had just arrived from the royal capital and was considering moving completely to the riverside area. Gimli is delighted to hear this, explaining that the town is in need of adventurers due to its primary focus on agriculture and trade. She held Gale's hand, expressing her gratitude for his presence. When the shortage of adventurers caused her a lot of trouble, Moca glared at them both. Was disgusted by Gimli's attempt to attract pity. Gimli asked if Moca was accompanying Gale on the mission, and Moca replied that she was just a companion from the royal capital. Amused by the presence of both adventurers, Gimli became excited and asked about Gale's profession, guessed that he might be a thief. Gale corrected herself, revealing herself to be a support-type cursecrafter. Hearing that, Gimli was a bit shy, trying to act less important when hearing about his profession. Gale explains that while he is primarily a support player, he can still participate in combat when needed. Gimli apologized if he appeared judgmental. Said that cursecrafters are rare these days and wondered what job would be suitable for him. Confident in his abilities, Gale affirmed that he would complete a few missions in the area to get acquainted before deciding on the next step. Gimli notices that Gale has chosen the task of exterminating the undead in the underground graveyard. Just heard the name of that place. Enough to evoke the challenges that await. This area has been abandoned due to danger, and sometimes zombies appear, causing trouble for the villagers. Gimli doubts Gale's ability to undertake such a dangerous mission. As a curse artist, Moca is angry, demanding that Gimli correct his statement about Gale. Meanwhile, Gale, with a confident expression, reassured Gimli that he was completely able to carry out the task. Gimli warns that if Gale gets lost in there, no one will be able to come save you. Undaunted, Gale expressed her eagerness to explore the place the next day, and asked if Gimli had a map of the area. Gimli happily gave him the map and offered to sell him holy items or magic items. However, Gale refused because he didn't need anything else for this mission. Before parting ways, Gimli reminded him to be careful because many adventurers had failed to complete their quests. Moca, feeling jealous of Gimli's friendliness towards Gale, stepped on his shoe, causing him to scream in pain. Gimli noticed Moca's jealousy and commented that the two seemed very close. Before officially welcoming them to the agricultural city of Farm Edge, she introduced herself as the guildmaster, and they exchanged a solemn bow. Gale suddenly remembered that she needed to complete one more task, so she asked Gimli to exchange the orc materials for money, which made Gimli a bit surprised because blood was still dripping from the bag. After finishing work, Gale promised to do her best and the two left the guild. Moca, while reflecting back on the conversation, felt that Gale was quite naive, a trait that she believed would not help him much in establishing a solid foundation in life. Gale, hearing her comment, simply admitted that she was a bit naive, and Moca turned away confused, trying to hide her emotions. Seeing her attitude, Gale asked if she had anything else to say. She sighed and confessed that she hadn't originally planned to go with him, but in the end decided to stay. She hesitantly admitted this with some trepidation, but did not refuse his companionship. Standing in the middle of the street, she met Gale's eyes as he calmly listened to the explanation. Moca said that she wasn't necessarily worried about him, but felt like he was too dependent on others, like a character who always needed to be saved. Gale looked straight into her eyes, smiled, and felt Moca's presence reassure him. Faced with his intimacy, Moca became confused, trying to hide her nervousness. He continued to express his joy at having her by his side, making her blush even more, not understanding why she felt so strange. Meanwhile, Gimli sat on the balcony under the night sky, overlooking the cliff, and told herself that she knew that Gale was no ordinary cursemaker. The next morning, Moca and Gale start their day with an energizing breakfast. They could feel the curious eyes of the villagers, as adventurers rarely appeared in this region. After finishing their meal, the two departed for the cemetery, where the mission was carried out. Gale was eager to get started and complete the mission quickly, while Moca seemed more nervous. She carries a bag full of necessary items to deal with the undead, and said it was just normal preparation. Gale, unconcerned, reassured her that everything would be fine, as he was very skilled in dealing with zombie-type enemies. As they entered the cemetery, Moca told them to retreat immediately if anything went wrong. Gale agrees. This place is surrounded by a series of tombstones and ancient tombs. Gale found the scene fascinating, while Moca couldn't understand what was so wonderful about the skeletons and decomposing corpses scattered everywhere. Gale immediately began inspecting the area. After seeing some footprints of the undead, she wondered if this place had been a dungeon centuries ago, because of how old it looked. Worried about the possible consequences of disturbing the soul's resting place, she emphasized the importance of respecting the deceased. Gale said they needed to investigate further and look at the skeletons. While examining, Gale discovered a zombie skull lying dormant in the sunlight and informed Moca that it would come to life when night fell. She trembled at that scene, and Gale decided to calm her down by holding up the skull. As she watched with concern, he suddenly moved the jaw of his skull, causing Moca to startle and react immediately with a punch so powerful that her skull shattered. Where is the respect for the dignity of the undead? Gale blurted out a meaningful question. Moca explains that undead creatures are the exception, as they are just monsters. Overwhelmed by the creepy atmosphere, Moca expressed that she wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Gale, sensing her fear, asked her to wait outside while he continued to explore. He realized that this cemetery had recently been turned into a dungeon, meaning they only encountered low-level creatures on the shallow levels. Moca felt that Gale's words of encouragement weren't helping. And even though I tried to wait outside the door with a lantern, fear made her decide to follow him inside. When faced with many undead creatures, panic caused Moca to cling tightly to Gale for protection, made him confused. When they had to face some zombies, she even used Gale herself as a weapon against the undead. In a moment of desperation, Moca took a lantern and threw it at the skeletons, setting them on fire. When Gale asked why she followed in even though she was so scared, Moca was confused, then finally confessed that she was worried about him as he had to face his enemies alone. They continued deeper into the dangerous part of the dungeon, with Gale telling her to trust her. Moca agreed, and the two walked hand in hand. Gale is truly a player. And this love boat is starting to sail. Before Gale and Moca left the capital, 4 struggling individuals stopped by a blacksmith shop to sell their equipment. None other than the struggling S-rank team led by Cash. The blacksmith refused to buy their dirty goods, leaving them homeless and hungry. Realizing the importance of money management, the group considers taking on low-level missions to regain strength. Luke outlined the work at the guild. Like exterminating low-level monsters, confronting skeleton knights, and hunting goblins. However, Cash and Melissa object to these missions out of pride. Norris tried to calm the situation down, explaining that they need to recover their strength gradually. Reluctantly, the party agrees to take on a C-rank quest with the skeleton knights. Luke and Norris provide rear support, and Cash and Melissa confront the monster head-on. However, their initial confidence quickly extinguished when the skeletons overwhelmed them, forcing the group to flee and fail the mission. The next day, the group tried their hand at the orc extermination mission. Let's say they lost -1,000 aura points because of their disastrous defeat. Days gone by. Cash and the other members gradually grew tired and returned to the Imperial City with a series of failures, without a single successful mission to report. Continuous failures have weighed heavily on their spirit, making them depressed and not knowing what to do next. And guess what the first thing they said was? Without shame, they declared that it was all Gale's fault. I agree. It's completely Gale's fault. He single-handedly carried all these scraps to S-rank. Norris tells the group that the priority now is to make money and then settle accounts with Gale. Luke said that Gale is so incompetent that she probably only opens a roadside stall now. Cash told the association's secretary, the mission is actually a scam and the monsters are stronger than expected. On another mission, Cash reassures the villagers that they have the situation under control. But when it comes to fighting, the villagers mainly have to fend for themselves. While Cash and the others were miserably defeated by the goblins, the guild secretary suggested that they should voluntarily downgrade from S-rank to avoid further loss of face. Cash heard that and got angry, grabbed the secretary's collar, but after being defeated by goblins and ogres, he was educated by a woman on the spot. Cash should change his name to Trash. Meanwhile, in Farm Edge's underground cemetery, undead creatures are everywhere. Gale probed deeper layers and felt the density of souls becoming increasingly dense, realizing the great potential of this underground cemetery. Moca closed her eyes, asking if there was anything in front of them, and Gale lied and said there was nothing. But when she senses a series of undead creatures, Moca immediately moved closer to him. Suddenly, a giant skeleton emerged from the ground. Gale immediately cast a dispelling spell on the skeleton monster. Destroy it in an instant. Moca opened her eyes and was surprised when he saw that the creature had been neatly dealt with. Gale explains that this is quite simple and compares it to priests performing exorcisms. Moca disagrees, saying that the methods are not the same, but Gale believes that the missionaries' methods are not necessarily perfect. He started thinking about how to explain to her, then grabbed a skull, look at it with a warm smile. Gale says his method is to give the zombies a chance to be heard, so he can hear their stories. After defeating the terrifying skeleton monster, Gale carefully picked up the pieces of the destroyed creature, not leaving any pieces behind. Meanwhile, Moca was still trying to understand what had just happened with surprise and curiosity, turning to Gale with a puzzled expression. She's confused by Gale's mention of listening to the stories of the undead, and doesn't understand how that has anything to do with a monk's duties. Gale gently reminded her that she needed to have a serious conversation. Then asked her if she knew what it meant to control the dead. Mora's eyes widened in surprise, trying to guess that maybe it was some kind of magic or special power. Her surprise increased when she saw the skeleton monster appear on Gale's back again. Its eerie presence serves as a stark reminder of the mystical world they are entering. Gale takes a moment to explain further, describing the art of controlling the dead as a powerful form of magic, especially in cemeteries, where the lines between life and death become blurred. Gale explains that the undead do not like cleansing or exorcism, which is like Satan going to be baptized. From the perspective of the undead, their presence in the human world is often due to resentments and unresolved emotions. So when they were forced to return to the grave, they felt like they were being unfairly blamed, as if their feelings and stories were being ignored. Gale tries to convey to Moca that, despite their scary appearance, zombies have stories and reasons to stay on Earth, just like everyone else. Moca, still confused, admitted to Gale that she had absolutely no idea what he was saying. Undeterred, Gale continued to explain using a more familiar example. Gale asked Moca if she could recall any moments in her childhood when she felt unfairly yelled at or ignored. Gale's words sank deep into her mind, reminding Moca of a vivid memory from when she was a child. She recalls a time when she excitedly talked about wanting to go on an adventure, but was scolded because it wasn't suitable for girls. Even though she tried to give examples of female explorers, her words were ignored by bigoted stereotypes. Moca was lost in her memories, and Gale noticed the distant look in her eyes. He gently asked if she was okay. Moca was startled and quickly reassured him with a forced smile, saying, "It's nothing." Gale listened attentively as the skeletons shared their stories. His face expressed genuine contemplation. One skeleton said that he died while still hungry and wished he could eat forever. Another skeleton said it was lonely because it died alone. Gale chuckled slightly as she joked, "Probably my only regret is not buying Bitcoin." But then he changed his tone, explaining that sometimes strong grudges stem from people being treated unfairly before they die. Often, these hatreds arise from small things in everyday life, annoying things that everyone has encountered. With a hopeful tone, Gale offers the simple idea that if people just understand and accept these small annoyances, it can make a big difference. When Gale summoned her magic, the ground shook, a scary darkness gradually emerged from the ground. Moca was so frightened that she jumped into Gale's arms, seeking safety in his embrace. When the Blackbone Knight appeared, mighty and menacing. But Gale remained calm, her eyes steady, her voice full of determination. As he calms Moca and prepares to face the approaching threat, Gale chanted the spell again, and his magic began to take effect. The scene gradually changed magically. The terrifying darkness on the Blackbone Knight's body began to disappear, and from within the darkness, a sparkling light appeared. The darkness gradually gave way, revealing the soul inside the skeletal form. During that transformation, a boy appeared, surrounded by fire, becoming a symbol of hope in the darkness. While Moca still stared in wonder at the magical sight, the boy gradually disappeared into thin air, leaving her in a confused and speechless state. Gale smiled and offered a simple explanation, claiming that the boy's fleeting appearance was just a brief encounter. Moca had a hard time understanding why the boy had disappeared so suddenly. Patiently, Gale explained more about her abilities. He revealed that, through his experience creating cursed items and objects, he gradually developed the ability to sense the emotions of spirits. He reassured Moca that he could sense when something was unusual, like the boy's unresolved regret about not being able to say goodbye to his fiancée. Moca, with growing curiosity, asked Gale in more detail about his abilities. Gale explains that by listening to the stories of the deceased and responding properly, he can help them find liberation and peace, as he did before with the skeletons and resentments of them. Moca thought deeply, admitting that souls not only sought guidance but also craved sympathy, because they were once human, each with their own emotions and stories. Gale nodded in agreement, remarking that empathy was indeed key when dealing with the spirits of the dead. He explains that it is not simply about fulfilling their requests, but also about understanding their emotions and experiences. Gale also revealed that this approach is especially effective in creating cursed items. By empathizing with the emotions of the spirits and reacting accordingly, he was able to gather ingredients of a much higher quality than the purification methods used by the priests. It is a delicate balance between understanding and respect that allows Gale to create cursed items that capture the essence of the deceased, while also ensuring that the soul can pass away in peace. As the two continued their journey, Gale noticed a thoughtful expression on Mora's face. Curious about her thoughts, he gently asked her to share. Mora hesitated for a moment, then stated her concerns. Wondered about Gale's stance on communicating with spirits, wondering if he considered it a simple task. After thinking for a while, Gale explained that it's not simple or complicated, but it depends on the way you look at it. To him, souls are just raw materials to work with, a feeling formed from his own experiences and understanding. However, Mora cannot accept Gale's explanation. She felt a surge of anger, seeing his views as superficial and insensitive. In Mora's eyes, Gale's laid-back approach to killing the undead and comparing their existence to mere material to work with truly unsettled her. With emotions running high, Mora confronts Gale, expressing her outrage at his seemingly easygoing attitude when dealing with the souls. She believes that his view downplays the importance of the mission, as well as diminishes the meaning of the work of those who dedicate themselves to guiding and purifying wandering souls. Gale was scared to death by her screams, and honestly any guy would be scared to death when confronted like that. As tensions escalate, Mora insists that Gale owes the monks an apology. Those monks work tirelessly to bring peace to restless souls and protect the sacredness of life after death. Gale, trying to calm the situation, suggested that eliminating the undead would actually bring satisfaction to all, turning the situation into a win-win outcome. However, Mora disagreed, realizing that the matter was not as simple as Gale thought. She believed that Gale's perspective minimized the complexity of the situation, making her even more upset. As Mora expressed her concerns, her voice grew louder, making Gale feel alarmed and somewhat afraid. In his heart, he realized that anyone would feel overwhelmed in such a situation. Despite their disagreement, Gale and Mora continued to move forward, proceed to the deepest part of the journey. Suddenly, right in the heart of this deep darkness, there was a strange light source shining, covering the space in magical light. As the two go deeper, they encounter countless terrifying creatures: skeleton knights, undead archers, black ghosts and even Death Eaters. Gale couldn't help but wonder if there was some connection to the underworld. The thought made him shudder. Mora, ever observant, commented on the large number of pale souls of the undead gathered in this place. She believes that their presence is the cause of the ghostly light that covers the surrounding area. Gale nodded in agreement, acknowledging Mora's logic and observations. However, he noticed something strange in her attitude. Even though there were many dangers lurking around, she seemed strangely calm. Almost too calm for the situation they were facing. When Gale suggested that she shouldn't close her eyes, Mora simply ignored his concerns, claiming that she was already familiar with the darkness. But Gale couldn't escape the feeling that she wasn't being completely honest. He sensed a fear hidden behind her calm expression, a fear she was trying to hide. Mora is such a clumsy liar, just looking at it is enough to make people feel embarrassed. Gale, a master of stealth and cunning, moved quietly behind a tall pillar, his every step carefully calculated to eavesdrop on the conversation between the skeletons in the gloomy room. Meanwhile, Mora, with unwavering alertness and vigilance, began to pay attention to Gale's subtle movements, her curious eyes following his every discreet move as he tried to avoid suspicion. Her doubt. Gale was quick to create a story on the spot, his mind racing to find a plausible reason for his secretive behavior. He shrugged nonchalantly and explained that he was just thinking about the possibility of there being lichs, immortal wizards, around, a topic that had been on his mind lately. Although Mora nodded in understanding, her expression still showed a hint of doubt. Still, she stood beside Gale, every sense on alert, ready to respond to any sign of danger. As the two stood in the darkness, Gale felt the atmosphere change, a clear tension enveloping the surrounding space. Mora, alert to every change in the environment, suggested that they leave immediately, her instincts urging caution in the face of lurking uncertainty. Gale, torn between her desire to explore further and the need to ensure their safety, carefully considered her next move. However, before they could make a decision, fate intervened. Interrupted by an unexpected incident. Mora's foot accidentally hit a nearby statue, causing it to fall to the ground with a groan. In the tense silence that followed, Gale and Mora held their breath, bracing themselves for the inevitable reaction from the skeletons that populated the room. Their hearts pounded in their chests. But surprisingly, the skeletons remained motionless, their strange stillness creating a mysterious space. Gale, his senses on high alert, sensed a disturbance in the darkness. Someone is getting closer, but who? With a quiet signal, Gale signaled Moca to take cover, all his senses sharp, ready to face whatever formidable opponent awaited them. Suddenly, from the deep darkness, a giant figure appeared before them. A giant skeleton with an imposing stature and overwhelming strength that makes it an unpredictable force. Gale's gaze locked on the newly appeared enemy, recognizing the special aura of authority that radiated from this skeletal form, a silent sign that it was one of the highest-ranking creatures in the ranks of corpses. Living. The whole room was immersed in a tense atmosphere, and an ominous silence fell as a high-ranking mage among the undead, an arch-sorcerer, entered with dignity. If only we had known he was such a big guy, we would have rolled out the red carpet for him. Gale's heart pounded, fully aware of the superior mage's immense power. The appearance of such a terrible creature on the ground could spell doom, as he can summon an entire army of the undead with just a thought. Really scary, right? The scene seemed to come straight out of a zombie legend, with a whole bunch of zombies surrounding him to increase his terrifying power. According to legend, this high-level magician can bring unspeakable disasters to humanity. A prospect that made Moca tremble in fear. Her questions poured in, each one a desperate attempt to understand the dangerous situation they were facing. Gale, always the voice of reason in the chaos, explaining that a being of such high class and power requires a special strategy. Dealing with this powerful enemy requires a high-ranking monk, skilled in both the arts of combat and spiritual energy. As Gale and Moca were hastily discussing, the peace was suddenly broken by an echoing noise of skeletons rushing forward with malicious intent. It's time to act. Adrenaline rushing through them, Gale urged Moca to escape, and you risked using the ultimate power of curse dispel, a secret technique of the great monks to undo the curses binding the souls of the wretched. In a fateful moment, the unthinkable happened. The High Mage, a terrifying specter of death, begins to transform. Gale and Moca watched in amazement as his form faded, his soul leaving his undead body, similar to the fate of the boy they had met. In that moment, the truth about the High Mage was revealed. He was a creature bound by curses, suffering the torment of his own existence. Finally, reaching the deepest level of the cemetery, Gale felt a wave of relief wash over him as he stepped out into the fresh air, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere underground. Beside him, Moca was in tears, her voice choked with emotion as she exclaimed that she never wanted to set foot in a cemetery again. As they stop to catch their breath, Moca reflects on the journey she's just been through. Facing an army of the undead and winning in one short day. It is a story that would seem unbelievable if someone else told it, but this is living proof of their own extraordinary adventure. Gale, always optimistic, downplays her achievements. Thought Moca's excitement was a bit of an overreaction. However, underneath the calm exterior, he couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that he had made a difference. When standing side by side in the dying sunset, Moca felt a deep sense of gratitude for her strange partnership with Gale. In him, she finds a companion who is always ready to face the unknown, no matter how scary the challenge. Outside the towering walls of the royal church, Cash and his group were facing a stern church member, his cloak fluttering in the wind. As he looked at them with the suspicious eyes of a church member passing over each person in the group, the atmosphere seemed heavier. Without waiting long, the priest asked a sharp question. "Are you cursed?" His voice was deep and authoritative, demanding a satisfactory answer. Cash, undeterred by the scrutiny, responded with a determined look. His voice was firm as he declared their purpose. That they went to the royal church to lift a curse caused by Gale. Cash emphasized the name with disdain, as if the mere mention of it was enough to upset him. Cash at this time is truly the embodiment of a genuine Karen. Elsewhere, Princess Carla was whispering to her young companion, her eyebrows furrowed as she pondered the rumors surrounding them. She asked if it had anything to do with money, and the young girl, wise beyond her years, nodded in agreement. She believed that this information came from a trustworthy source, a reputable adventurer from the Capital Guild. There are even whispers of recent sightings that seem to be related to the rumors. Meanwhile, Cash and his teammates entered the church, their appearance immediately attracting curious eyes from those around them. Cash, the astute observer, was fascinated by the design of the synagogue's carpet, his fingers running over the patterns like a 6-year-old child absorbed in discovery. In another corner, Princess Carla's attendant silently watched Cash's group. With a pensive look on his face, his mind filled with thoughts about the recent turmoil. With responsibility weighing him down, he walked towards Princess Carla. Every deliberate step, reporting on the suspicious behavior of Cash and his accomplices. Princess Carla's face flashed with anxiety but determination. She looked at Cash with steady eyes, as if silently asking a question that is difficult to say out loud. Cash responded with a vague smile, his eyes filled with mystery and hurt. Meanwhile, Moca and Gale asked about their next destination, as Gimli smiled and said, She is considering going to the Forging Guild, which gathers highly skilled members. The whole group quickly headed there to arrange a flexible location for Gale's stall. Gale was somewhat confused to find herself here instead of the Merchant Guild. But Gimli explains that the Forgers Guild has greater influence at Farm Edge, even overshadowing the Merchants Guild. The Forging and Casting Association not only attracts financial resources but is also a gathering place for talented workers. Therefore, they need to try to build loyalty and trust with the Forging Guild. With all the information about these different guilds, Gale's head was spinning. However, he understood that in an agricultural city like Farm Edge, iron products were of great value. The Forging Guild undertakes not only repairs but also the production of new tools, and has a deep understanding of the tools needed for different types of soil. Because they are local, they can provide agricultural tools specifically designed to suit soil and weather conditions. Thanks to its expertise and diverse supply sources, the Forging and Casting Association has become an attractive destination for everyone here. Gale realized that greeting the most influential person in the Blacksmith Guild would help him secure a prime location for his stall. Gimli nodded and asked if they had brought souvenirs with them. The idea of souvenirs excited Gale, but Mora had a bad feeling, understandably. Gale took out a cursed necklace and a cursed energy splitter that terrifies everyone around. Mora was angry because he brought those items to a crowded place. Luckily, Gimli took them to some shops to buy souvenirs along the way. So Mora decided to take over the gift giving. Under Gimli's guidance, they entered the guild and witnessed the smith's hard work. The space is filled with large iron objects and furnaces. The heat was clearly felt by Gale and Mora. There is no reception here. It was more like a workshop for artisans than a guild. When I realized that, Gale is not used to speaking loudly. Mora walked up and tried to talk to someone, but no one responded. Gimli explains that due to the high noise level, they cannot hear her. Mora demonstrates how loud they need to shout. She called Sharina's name in a strong voice, shocking Gale and Mora. The sound cuts through the noisy space and attracts everyone's attention. Suddenly, a large hammer flew towards them, but both of them were lucky enough to dodge it. Sharina appears, reprimanding Gimli for being noisy so early in the morning. Sharina is a dwarf girl with short hair and a somewhat stubborn attitude. Gale and Mora were surprised to hear they were here to see her. Gimli blames Sharina for not responding when they called her earlier. The two exchanged teasing words, causing Mora to wonder if there was any tension between the elven and dwarven races. Gimli dismissed that worry and introduced Sharina as the guildmaster of the Forging Guild and the most influential person in Farm Edge. Sharina greeted them warmly and extended her hand to shake. When Gale shook her hand, he noticed Sharina's hands were large compared to her body, covered with small scars from blacksmithing, with thick arms and singed skin, testament to her long experience in blacksmithing. Mora looked back and forth between Sharina and Gale, then finally asked why he was so silent. Meanwhile, Gale and Sharina both felt the similarity from a simple handshake, both showing a wide smile. When realizing that they are all high-class artisans, Gimli interjected, teasing them for staring at each other. Both quickly released their hands and denied any strange thoughts. Mora felt a bit uncomfortable and fake coughed to redirect the conversation. Gimli then asked Sharina if Gale, who had just arrived from the royal capital, could open a stall in town. Sharina reacted nonchalantly, saying that Gale could set up his booth wherever he wanted because she didn't mind. Sharina explains that the Blacksmith Guild is currently lacking materials, which has kept her busy since morning, and does not want to waste time on unnecessary matters like Gimli requested. After hearing the whole story from Gimli, Sharina realized that starting a stall without permission could cause trouble with the merchant guilds. While Sharina respects their honorable approach to handling things, she had no intention of interfering in town affairs. Sharina shared that, unlike the imperial capital, she focuses on repairing and reusing objects instead of throwing them away. She repaired things for others as part of her job, and before she knew it, she had become the face of the blacksmith guild in town. Sharina sat down and asked for Gale's name, advised him not to pay too much attention to what Gimli said, and called Gimli a suspicious elf girl, causing them to quarrel a bit. Finally, Sharina agreed to write a letter of recommendation for Gale. Gale rejoiced, and Mora and him jumped up in celebration. Sharina interrupted and said she was just joking, things weren't that easy. Sharina suggested a barter method to gain permission, stating that they needed to show proper sincerity. Gale didn't quite understand what she meant, but Mora immediately pulled out a bottle of local fire wine she'd brought as a gift. Sharina prepares to receive the gift from Mora. But Gale suddenly interrupted, insisting that he also brought a special gift. Mora quickly pulled him back and reminded him that he didn't have to contribute anything, but Gale insisted that Sharina would love the sword he brought. Gale was upset at Mora's strictness with her. Sharina's gaze turned to Gale's sword, and she became curious. She moved closer to take a closer look, and surprise was evident on her face. This sword is truly a masterpiece, crafted extremely delicately. And just a glance, Sharina was able to realize that this was no ordinary sword. They immediately felt the harmony of the craftsman. Gale was so happy to see someone truly understand and appreciate the value of the item he created that his eyes sparkled. Sharina told him that there was no need to be polite with her, and Gale could see that she was truly a master at her craft. Gale shared that he was very happy to meet someone who understood the value of his work. Moca and Gimli watched the scene and tried to comfort him in his emotions. While Sharina couldn't help but admire the structure of the sword, she seemed satisfied, which made Moca feel a little jealous. She cleared her throat again to get Sharina's attention, and Gimli understood. Sharina commented that she had a blacksmith at the shop who could examine the sword more thoroughly. But she was able to realize that this must be a rare item dropped by monsters. She enjoyed the enchantment effects on the sword and discovered that it had blood absorption properties, increased sharpness, and darkness properties. When Gale proudly said that the sword had one more effect, Sharina realized that it also had the attribute of being light, making it easy to carry and swing the sword flexibly. Moca was amazed at Sharina's ability to perceive so much, something that even she as a mage could not do. This sword is truly ideal for a pioneering swordsman in the group. Sharina swung her sword a few times excitedly. Then finally she commented that the wielder of this sword could fight solo without a partner. Gale agrees and adds that the sword is also resistant to magic, dust, and especially, it is cursed. Sharina liked the sword's resistance to magic and dust, but when she heard the cursed part, she suddenly froze. Immediately, the curse effect activated and wrapped around her arm. Seeing her panic, Gale was a bit disappointed and quickly assured her that he could remove the curse easily. Sharina got angry and scolded him for being an idiot for not making this important description clear before, retracting all her previous praise. Meanwhile, Gimli just stood by, enjoying watching everything happen. She could see that the enchantments on the sword were truly amazing and knew that if it hadn't been cursed, Sharina would have been impressed. Watching Gale skillfully handle the curse, Gimli realized that he was indeed an outstanding curse artist and that perhaps he was the person from the story about the princess she had heard. While I was disinfecting myself, Sharina changed her mind and decided not to allow Gale to open the stall. Gale spoke up that he had tried so hard to create the sword she had just criticized. Sharina immediately assumed that, with the way he continued to sell cursed tools like this, the town would be destroyed. After a moment of silence, she said that she wasn't that heartless, and asked him if he really wanted to open a stall that much. Gale bowed her head for permission, partly pressured by Moca, and begged Sharina to allow him to open the stall. Moca also apologized on Gale's behalf, saying that although he was a bit eccentric, he also had good qualities. Moca gets straight to the point and asks Sharina what she wants them to do in return. Sharina said she wouldn't ask for money from a new person, but she wanted them to make a request of hers. She explains about a mineral mine called the Soul Mine in Farm Edge and needs someone to take on the task of exterminating the monsters that have nested there. However, Sharina warns in advance that this is not an ordinary mission. Anyone who has set foot in the Soul Mine is missing, and even now, they still don't know what happened or what kind of monster did it. Moca and Gale never thought they would face a task twice as difficult as this. Sharina looked at them with questioning eyes, and asked again if they were willing to ensure the safety of the Anunnaki mine. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, Carla was extremely shocked when she heard the news from Vivian. She thought that the assassination attempt on her might have been carried out by an imperialist imposter, but it turns out that the empire itself is behind this. Carla refuses to believe it, but Vivian insists the information is accurate, as she herself tortured the assassins to get their confessions. The cause of the assassination was a succession struggle within the empire. The first prince of the empire was the one who wanted to kill the princess by hiring an assassin. The eldest prince wanted to do so because the emperor was bedridden due to illness, and right now, a tense succession struggle broke out between the eldest prince, the son of a concubine, and the second prince, the queen's child. Carla asked why she was involved in this, and Vivian said that although there was no direct involvement in the assassination, it was impossible to ignore the fact that Carla had been chosen as the fiancée of the empire's second prince. Carla suddenly became depressed, as if she had forgotten that she doesn't want to be arranged into such a marriage. But her butler reminds her that this is a commitment between nations, beyond her personal will. It can be said that the eldest prince's opposition is not happy with the second prince marrying Carla, as it would strengthen his power. And in other words, the marriage between Carla and the second prince is nothing more than an obstacle for the prince. As things stand now, there's nothing that can stop that. The eldest prince, even if his actions were exposed, could still take advantage of the empire's current chaotic state. Since the empire is not yet unified, two strategies will likely be used to deal with this situation. First, the younger prince could use the assassination incident as an excuse to take action against the eldest prince, creating goodwill for the empire. Additionally, there is a possibility that another assassin will be sent, according to the information Vivian obtained from previous assassins. Vivian said that if the kingdom continued to assert that the empire denied the incident and took no action, that would only cause trouble for Carla unless she wanted to get into a war with them. Carla was tired after hearing about these intrigues. Announced the annulment of the engagement. And looked at the ring that Gale gave her. Back to Farm Edge. Gale, Mora, Gimli and Sharina have arrived at the Anunnaki mines. They quickly realized that none of them had any fighting skills. Gale reminded Sharina that she should have hired more members for this mission. Sharina replied that this was the reason this quest was on hold for a long time because there was no one. Sharina explains that the mission was originally ranked C. But since no one has finished it all this time, it went up to AAA. After a bit of arguing as usual, everyone calmed down and discussed how to approach the mission from here. Gale understood that if they did not complete this quest, the difficulty level would increase to S rank. They looked into the mine and felt creepy when they heard a small sound echoing out. At first I thought it might just be the sound of the wind. However, Gale senses the presence of an extremely dangerous monster inside. Sharina then spoke loudly, calling them cowards and asking why they were afraid. She reminded them of the steadfastness of adventurers, while she would import more weapons from these mines because they could not be exploited yet. The group looks back at the quest notice and remembers that those who have entered this mine before have not returned. Furthermore, the reward for the mission is not much, only 10 gold coins. Sharina explains that because the previous quest had a low difficulty, the reward was also low. Mora reasoned that if the quest reward was low, it was understandable why no one would want to take on the quest. Gale continued, saying that they would have difficulty without a pioneer leading the way. Mora reminds him that he once defeated an entire army led by a mage single-handedly, but Gale replies that it was because they were just undead. He wasn't sure he could defeat any of the unknown monsters. Sharina, tired of the complaints, stepped forward and suggested that she would take on the role of pioneer for them. Mora and Gale were stunned by this proposal. And Sharina had no problem taking on the role, although they were concerned about her safety. Gimli spoke up, asserting that it was perfectly fine for Sharina to be the pioneer. Meanwhile, Mora felt uneasy, knowing that their team was very unbalanced with a curse user, a support mage, and a blacksmith. However, she believes that Gale's creations will be useful. Determined to complete the task quickly so that Gale can open a counter in a prime location thanks to Sharina's permission. They entered the mine while Gimli wished them luck on their challenging journey. Sharina informed the group that there were many ventilation holes in the mine, and when the wind blew through them, the sound was like howling a dog. They also encountered many different types of rock, such as iron ore and mithril ore. When everything seems peaceful, everyone relaxes. But at that moment, Mora spotted something up ahead. She squinted into the darkness and saw a scary face appear, causing her to scream in panic. She called Gale and said there was a zombie ahead. Of course, Gale gets excited when she hears about zombies. But when they examined it closely, it turned out to be just a stone statue. Sharina saw the statue and realized that the sculpture on it was very detailed, as if it were alive. She and Gale were both impressed with the workmanship on the statue. However, Mora, the only one still conscious, looked around and noticed something. She quickly pulled both of her insane friends back and forced them to look around. The group was shocked to discover that there was not just one but a series of other stone statues. Looks lively with many different expressions. Sharina stared at a particular statue and was suddenly speechless. She confirmed that she recognized the face in that statue. Are the adventurers from the Farm Edge region? Sharina's face turned pale, and she tried to understand how they had turned into statues. Gale grabbed Sharina's hand and said that this was clearly the work of some monster. Knowing that monsters must be around, the group immediately took a high alert position. Mora reminded everyone to pay attention to all their surroundings. Gale has a bad feeling because only a few special monsters have this ability. Mora figured it would definitely be an A-rank monster or higher, maybe a basilisk. After carefully observing the surroundings, Gale began to sense the smell of a cockatrice. A half-snake, half-chicken creature, lurking somewhere. Feathers scattered around. A clear sign that only cockatrice has the ability to turn anything into stone. This is a creature with formidable defense, can knock out conventional weapons thanks to its sharp claws and dangerous beak, along with a venomous bite. But the scariest thing is its breath that can turn anything to stone. Gale asked Mora to move to the back with him, while trying to think of a way to cope. His curse can slow down enemies. That's when Sharina used her big hammer to unleash combo attacks. Hitting the cockatrice causes the monster to fly into the air. Both Mora and Gale were surprised to see this 5-hit mid-air combo. They asked Gale about the powerful darts he used, and he calmly revealed that he had once turned death into a material for making darts. Mora grabbed his collar and scolded him, because who in his right mind would calmly say, "Ah, death, he was so annoying that I turned him into a dart." But then she realized the war wasn't over yet. When they had only defeated the chicken part of the monster. Immediately, Mora strengthened Shirina's muscles, helping her be ready to fight the snake part of this creature that was preparing to bite them. Shirina plunged her hammer into the snake's mouth, then grabbed both its head and tail. "Now let me show you the power of a first-rate blacksmith," she said, and then cruelly tore the snake in half. "Finish it off." So the double-level mission is completed. Mora wondered why this chicken was hanging around in a place like this. Gale calmly replied that perhaps he had mistaken the mine for a chicken coop. At that moment, under Mora's feet, a piece of eggshell broke off. And from the darkness, an army of chicks appears. The chicks jumped into the riot, and all three immediately ran for their lives. Thanks to Mora's enhanced powers, Shirina created a pile of dead chicks around them. But the problem still remains, because the number of chicks is still too much, causing Gale, Mora and Shirina facing a relentless crowd. Gale tried to think of a way to deal with them, but the curse tools he had relied on before had no effect on these weak creatures. A feeling of despair began to appear, and the three became even more worried. As the chicks become more aggressive, Mora and Gale stood in the back, while Shirina tried to maintain position and prevent the chicks from getting closer. Mora realizes they need to target the chicks and asks Gale if there's any useful items. Gale searched through her pile of cursed items and filtered out items that could help right now. He looked disappointed and said that there were only items left for interior decoration. If Gale claims so, then that can only mean that these are boss-level items. Gale found the cursed headband, shadow mask, and the horn, the breath of lamentation, and nonchalantly said that these items were just for decoration and that their effects were insignificant. After drowning his creations, he accidentally listed that they only tripled defense, doubled speed, fatigue resistance, and toxin immunity. Both Mora and Shirina were shocked and upset. Frustrated by Gale's foolish naivety, perhaps they even wanted to call him some unpleasant words. Shirina, who had always held a front-line position, immediately abandoned her duty and rushed to Gale. She claims that it is these enhancements that they need most right now. Mora erects a defensive wall so that Shirina can easily equip items without danger. Gale reminded her that these items were not for combat, so she shouldn't complain. Shirina looked closely at the headband's design and almost vomited when she saw that it had dense small holes, reminding her of something scary. But then she had to remind herself that design style was probably never Gale's strong point. Shirina was well aware of the emergency situation and understood that they needed to increase their offensive power. After wearing the cursed headband that tripled defense and reduced fatigue, along with the shadow mask that improved night vision and toxin immunity, she felt a surge of strength fill her and her fatigue disappeared instantly. The only negative thing about wearing these items is that she looks like a real clown. Gale gave her the final item, the wailing breath horn with the ability to double her speed and 5 times her strength. Shirina's equipment was now complete, and she felt invincible. If Gimli were here, she would probably laugh until she couldn't stop. Meanwhile, Gale looked at Shirina with a proud fatherly expression as Shirina felt the power explode in each fingertip. The defensive wall behind Shirina cracked, and for a moment it seemed like she wouldn't have time to dodge the attack. Surprisingly, she not only dodged but also turned around, swing the hammer with terrible power, take down multiple chicks in a single blow. It all happened in a few short seconds. Gale's eyes sparkled with admiration while Mora wondered if this was the Shirina they knew. Shirina released a new skill and named it Infinite Reversal, while displaying his extraordinary strength, and began laughing maniacally. Mora worriedly asked Gale if there was anything dangerous about the curse tools, but he explained that it was just a combination of the normal effects and a new, stronger effect, born from the interaction between various cursed artifacts. Shirina had reached a state of extreme excitement, and delivered the finishing blow to the last chicken. After the battle ended, she threw away the items and called them trash, with an annoyed look. Her fatigue and stress had built up even though the cursed items created the illusion of power. Like a slap from karma, when the items were removed, she immediately felt exhausted and fell to the ground, unable to move. This reminds everyone that without Gale's curse tools, they are nothing, no matter how ugly they are. Mora examined Shirina's condition and realized that the damage she had received in battle was slowly destroying her body. Gale suggests that they rest, as over time the pain will subside. Shirina lay still on the ground like a corpse, while Mora and Gale praise her for fighting bravely. Mora was also exhausted and needed to rest. After a while, Shirina declares that the mission protect the Inunaki mines, with AA level difficulty, finally completed. They celebrated their victory together and laughed happily. Mora expressed regret for venturing into a dangerous place without knowing anything about the cockatrice's nest. Gale and Shirina also had the same thoughts, wishing they had stayed away from this place in the first place. But it seems that every time they think they've completed their mission and start celebrating, fate has a way of getting them into new troubles. Suddenly, Gale felt uneasy about this situation. The phrase, cockatrice nest, sounds like a warning bell. It was the same feeling he had when he discovered the eggs had hatched. Suddenly he realized that there was still another cockatrice nearby. Unfortunately, another cockatrice appeared right in front of them, bigger and more aggressive. They realized this was a male. The one they killed before was just a female. The male attacked immediately, causing them to dodge for a split second. They now understood why this mine had troubled previous explorers. Shirina noticed that this male also had many snakes attached to its body. The monster was so angry that he threw a cow at them. Perhaps the same cow he brought back to his children, but is now dead thanks to this trio. Shirina quickly lifted her hammer and deftly blocked the incoming rock. She encouraged the remaining two to be a little more resilient and reminded her that she was just as tired as they were. The male is angry because his family is dead, and Shirina also has her own reasons to be angry. She declared that this mine was the domain of the Blacksmiths Guild, and that no chickens were allowed to roam freely here. When the cockatrice dares to trespass into their territory, it will first have to witness Shirina's wrath. She rushed towards the rooster. But Gale noticed a strange mist coming out of the monster's mouth. He quickly chased after her and promptly pulled her back, prevent her from entering the range of that mist. He said that he had only heard rumors about this petrified breath before. Until today. The rooster was still furious, spraying continuous waves of mist. Gale explains that anything that touches this mist will turn to stone. This was the weapon that defeated other explorers. Gale and Shirina are trying their best to distract the enemy, while Mora struggled to analyze the mist. She realized its range was short and the spray speed was also slow. She tried to find a way out, but the entire area was blocked by petrifying mist. Before she could think of a plan, she was horrified to see Gale and Shirina is rushing towards me at top speed. Mora screamed in fear, telling them not to come any closer, but it was clear that Gale and Shirina had no other choice. At that moment, one of the rooster's snakes attacked them. And they ducked to avoid it just in time, causing the snake to smash into the stone wall behind it, shattering it into pieces. Once again, the feeling of despair prevailed. When they realized there was no more stone wall to defend, and also lost Shirina's hammer, they had nothing to shield them from the next petrifying breath. At that moment, Shirina spoke up, saying that if they needed a shield, she would become their shield. They tried to stop her, but the rooster was about to attack again, and there was no time to think. Shirina quickly stood between them and the rooster, arms outstretched. Asked them to stay in her shadow. As Mora burst into tears, Shirina reminded her that she was the front line. It was her job to protect them. The rooster spit out its petrifying breath and the mist enveloped Shirina's body, causing her to start turning to stone. Shirina's last words were that no matter how weird Gale was, she couldn't hate him. She also asked them to take care of her, members of the Blacksmith Guild. Especially Gimli, hope she does well. She regretted not having had time to say this directly to Gimli. In a moment of desperation, Gale reached out and used the Dispel Curse. Shirina's body suddenly lit up, and the petrification curse was lifted. Shirina emerged from danger, safe and sound. Gale scratched his head awkwardly and smiled widely, saying that he had a hunch that he could break the petrification curse. If he wasn't the main character protected by plot armor, he would probably be manhandled by Mora and Shirina in anger right now. Mora and Shirina were speechless when Gale apologized, saying he didn't expect the Gorgon and Cockatrice's petrifying breath to be the same. He further explains that a Gorgon is a monster shaped like a woman with snakes growing from its head, and anyone who looks into its eyes will be turned to stone. Gale also explains that curses are not limited to undead or demon-type monsters, but can also appear on animals. He was excited to discover this, and found it strange that petrification could be caused by a poison. Shirina, with a hint of sarcasm, pointed into the rooster, panting, tired and shaking his head. This means that the petrification attack also drains it of stamina. Mora realized that if Gale could undo the petrifying breath, then they had nothing to fear anymore. She immediately decided that they needed to counterattack before the monster had time to recover. Mora felt her energy was enough to perform a strengthening spell and she decided to strengthen Shirina. They devised a plan. Shirina would hold the snake's body tightly, while Gale would deliver the finishing blow to the rooster's head with her powerful cursed weapon. Without hesitation, They rushed forward with determination. The snakes immediately attacked them. Sharina fends off the snakes' attacks with just her fists, and quickly jumped back. Use the recoil from the punch to defeat both snakes. The time has come when the cockatrice is preparing to attack. Gale quickly advanced, past the snakes. Sharina shouted loudly, telling him to attack with all his might. And Gale took it literally. He decided to put the rooster to sleep forever by using all the curse tools he had. Gale listed all the random curses he was about to unleash at the rooster, hoping that at least one of them would be effective. The curse tools he scattered had many different deadly effects, even poison. He excitedly named this attack something long-winded like powerful melee multi-curse attack, creating a rain of curses surrounding the monster. The rooster tried to resist, but trapped by cursed items in many locations. Sharina asked if Gale had really used up everything, and he proudly nodded. Said that he didn't know which would work on a boss-level monster, so he tried them all. Mora was worried when she heard what Gale said. Then right after that, the curses started taking effect at the same time. She called him an idiot for doing such a reckless thing, because she knew that if all of his curse tools activated at once, it could lead to disaster. He laughed and said she was exaggerating. But then the items began to glow brighter than ever. Without any warning, a huge explosion occurred, knocking all three into the air. The important thing is that the rooster has been destroyed. But when the dust cleared, Sharina stood up first. Mora was upset because mud was all over her, and Gale was lying face down on the ground in a funny position. They were about to scold him for this carelessness, but then realized the nightmare was not over. The entire area began to shake, and soon rocks began to fall. All three quickly ran away. When large rocks continuously fell, they tried to run back along the original path, passing the petrified explorers, but unfortunately could not stop to help them. They continued running until they finally escaped the mine. Gale and Mora breathed a sigh of relief when they escaped alive, but Sharina got angry and gave each of them a punch. It was ironic that she was the one who assigned this mission to two new recruits, who were not specialized in combat, and now she was angry with them. She is no different from the previous members of Gale's group. Sharina blamed them for destroying the mine when their mission was simply to destroy monsters. Gale innocently asks if their actions count as achievements, and Sharina quickly denies. Mora again argued that they had completed their mission, so they deserved a reward. This only made Sharina angrier, and declared that it was she who should be compensated for the losses suffered by the Blacksmiths Guild's mines. Gale was only interested in getting a position to open a stall, and he reminded Sharina that she had promised to help him make some connections. Mora also emphasized that they risked their lives for this mission, so they should definitely be rewarded. Sharina objected, claiming that she was the one who risked her life the most, and refused to introduce them to other members. Sharina claims that they will definitely be hated when news of the explosion in the mine spreads. She emphasized that she had suffered the most, from wearing cursed equipment, losing her beloved hammer, to even losing the mine. We'll just ignore that the other explorers might have been turned to ash in the cave. Meanwhile, in a place not far from the mine, someone slowly emerged from an underground exit of the mine. She once thought she might die in the cave, but luckily she escaped safely. That person was Gimli, who secretly followed the group to observe the power of the cursed items that Gale created. Although he realized that following Gale was much more dangerous than expected, Gimli also had to admit that what she saw was worthwhile. The extraordinary power that Gale demonstrates through the cursed items is a great opportunity in her plans. She now clearly understood that while Gale could only create cursed items, their power was far beyond any artifact she had seen before. The trio returned to the cave after all the chaos had subsided. Thanks to the plot protection armor again, all the stone statues remained intact, probably because they were more durable than expected. Gale approached one of the stone statues and used the curse dispelling spell. Unexpectedly, the spell worked, and the statue turned back into a flesh and blood adventurer. The adventurer named Charlie hugged his wife, Penelope, and thanked Gale and Mora from the bottom of their hearts for helping him reunite with his loved one. Gali, in his style, immediately asked if they wanted to buy a special talisman at a discounted price, and invite them to stop by your store afterward. Sharina couldn't bear it and scolded Gale, telling him not to sell cursed items while this emotional. Meanwhile, Gimli heard a knock at the door, and rolled her eyes when she realized it was Sharina. The two sat down to chat, and Sharina took out one of Gale's darts, asked Gimli to check. Gimli uses a dissecting glass to clearly see the effects of the darts, and was so surprised that I couldn't believe my eyes. She couldn't believe the existence of such an item. Sharina confirmed that this was indeed a precious artifact, although at first she thought it was just a joke. Sharina asked Gimli why Gale was distributing these items as if they were on sale. Gimli also couldn't understand what was going on in his head. Sharina reveals that Galia rescued everyone who was turned to stone again. The church once abandoned them, but Gale's dispelling magic helped them escape their petrification. Sharina said that in the restored mine, more and more explorers are being found. They are either partially eaten, or petrified by cockatrices. She realized that Gale's dispelling curse was not a normal one, as he showed no signs of exhaustion or stress despite using it multiple times. Sharina decided to return to the blacksmith guild for a while and expressed that, while Gale's skills were genuine, he lacked his usual acumen. Gimli agrees and reminds Sharina that there are no restrictions on adventurers joining other guilds. Both smiled at each other, but then quickly turned away when realizing the embarrassment. Meanwhile, Gale and Mora are helping other guild workers clean up the mine. Mora told him that he was either a hero saving people who were turned to stone, or a saboteur who caused the mine to collapse. After a moment of hesitation, she asked him if he would join the Blacksmith Guild. Gale confirmed that he is now a member of both the Adventurers Guild and the Blacksmiths Guild. Sharina had said that he needed to join the Blacksmith Guild to have a place for his stall. Mora called it a rare case, as the Blacksmith Guild was usually made up only of blacksmiths. It was unusual for them to allow an adventurer to join. She asked him what he was doing for the guild, and he replied that he was just borrowing a corner of the guild to create cursed tools. Mora complimented him on being recognized by so many people, but he wasn't sure about that. No matter how many cursed tools he created, he still felt that none of them were truly good. He decided to only focus on making interior decorations. He showed her one of them, called the White Bone Pot. And Mora immediately felt a shiver when she saw him plastering it with skulls and flowers. Our protagonist could definitely attract a true goth with these outlandish items, she thought. Gale explains that this flask allows for constant mana regeneration and increased healing speed. Mora tries to explain to Gale the true rarity and value of the items he creates, but in the end she had to give up. At that moment, Sharina appeared, as usual criticizing Gale's clothes. She gave him a bag containing the cockatrice's head, so he can receive a reward from the Adventurers Guild. She also gave him a monster mist generator, so he can use it to create more cursed tools. Gale's joy seemed immeasurable. And Sharina smiled, said that before you use any of it, she would teach him about the concept of supply and demand, because he needed to stop giving away everything he made for free. She insisted that he was selling rockets for candy, causing Gale to brace himself for a boring economics lecture, making him think maybe he should stay with his old group. Meanwhile, the second prince, Burial, is torturing the leader of the assassination squad for failing to assassinate Princess Carla. He threatens to cast her soul into the most cursed artifact they possess, the Demon King's heart. In her last chance to save her life, the assassin leader declares that the princess possesses a mysterious item that has the ability to revive even after instant death. She also affirmed that she knew the identity of the person who gave the princess that item. Meanwhile, Gale is learning the basics of the business, when death seems to be lurking around the corner of a pub. This is where adventurers from all over the capital gather. Cash, Luke, Melissa and Norris are doing what they do best: being pathetic. Cash slammed his beer on the table and wondered if Gale really went to a farming town. Melissa and Norris reminded him to keep his voice low, so that no one could hear and steal the reward for catching Gale before them. This group of lack of brain cells still cannot believe that the rumor about the carriage that passed through Oryx unscathed was related to Gale. Cash, with his rude and ungrateful nature, shouted for the waitress. When she arrived, he roughly slammed his hand on the table, overbearingly ordered beer and a barrel of wine to be brought to him. Luke warns Cash that he shouldn't exaggerate too much, and asked if they really should believe the story about that carriage. The group wondered if the rumors were merely rumors, as it was unlikely that a defender could take down a horde of orcs. Even if that were true, the person who defeated the orcs alone must be very strong. Cash brushes everything off and says there would be no reason to make the team if just one defender can do so much. Luke asked him to patiently listen to the rest of the story, and said that the rumored defender's description spoke of an extremely flashy outfit, a stylus dagger, and of wiping out a horde of orcs with some kind of artifact. He thinks these details are somewhat similar to Gale. Cash immediately put that idea out of his mind, asserting that Gale could not do such a thing. He reminded everyone that they had struggled with just one orc, so how could Gale defeat them all? He was sure it must be someone else. Luke tried to continue the story, but Melissa interjected and asserted that she had met several witnesses related to Gale. Cash immediately told her to continue. Melissa confirmed that Gale had indeed opened a stall at the market and sell cursed items at very cheap prices. Melissa said that Gale claimed the items were just interior decoration and had absolutely no style. But for some reason, the Royal Guard took everything back from everyone. Cash found this information interesting and said that the items must be trash, causing everyone to complain. Cash is upset to learn that Gale is still making a decent profit from the trade. Norris continued his story. He said he met some regulars who had seen Gale at a high-class motel. And even buy new things. Luke pieces the pieces together and realizes that this means that Gale must have earned enough money to rent a carriage. He also added that the Royal Army was also looking for Gale, so they must have searched every corner of the city. Therefore, the fact that Gale made a lot of money may have led to her decision to leave the city and start a new life elsewhere. Cash then asked them what was the final conclusion of all this. Norris replied that Gale may have changed course to move further away from the capital. Although this was just a guess, they were surprised by the possibility that Gale had left, and recalling that Gale is truly a free man, could easily do something like set up a cursed goods store elsewhere. They remembered that Gale always had a lot of cursed items on hand, so opening a stall with enough goods to sell was completely feasible. Each new detail discovered makes Cash more bitter at Gale's success. Melissa revealed that she also visited the Merchants Guild in the capital and knew that Gale had gone there to open a stall. Although the businessman was hesitant to share details, he admitted that he had met Gale, but it was unclear where Gale was and what she was doing. Luke thinks that Gale seems very confident in business, so maybe he went to another city to start a business. These details made Cash's head feel like it was about to explode. "When my glass of wine is empty," he shouted for the waiter to bring more. Cash is confident he will pay. Because all expenses go into Princess Carla's treasury. So he wanted to drink to his heart's content. The waiter arrived, but what surprised everyone was that she easily carried 2 large barrels of beer in her hand and dropped them firmly on the table before leaving. Cash shouted for proper service, but she just quietly walked away like a true queen. It turned out that the waiter was an assassin named Liznette. She took off her wig and pouted as her teammates praised her for putting up with Cash. Liznette is trying to eavesdrop on the group's conversation about Gale to gather information for her mission. Others asked if she was sure about these people. Liznette replied that she had heard about the wolf pack having a bad attitude and is connected to both the princess and the maker of the cursed items. She confirmed these things through eavesdropping. When asked about how to find Gale, Liznette scratched her head in frustration and admitted that she wasn't sure what to do. To her, Gale was an extremely cunning person, because he kept his movements secret from everyone. No one expected that Gale was surviving with only 1.5 brain cells working. Liznette claims that the only information they know about Gale is his odd mannerisms. She said that no matter how much information she gathered about Gale, it would be of no use. Because he is a schemer who uses many strategies to leave fragmentary clues to confuse others and hide his true identity. Meanwhile, our poor protagonist is probably being taught the basics of economics by Sharina. Liznette decides that following the wolf pack, who are searching for Gale, is the best option so they can get closer to her. She thinks it's worth paying attention to every conversation they have. Her plan is to stick close to the wolf pack until they find Gale, then capture him. The assassins return to their temporary jobs in the tavern, while Liznette whispers curses at Gale, calling him despicable. Perhaps she will be extremely shocked to learn that, contrary to what she thinks, Gale is actually just a bewildered rabbit jumping around in the meadow, spreading joy and kindness everywhere. The thought of him doing something as cruel and cunning was like a penguin trying to fly into the sky. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the Blacksmith Guild in Farm Edge, Mora went to Gale's room while he was working. She just stood there watching him work hard. And then he suddenly turned around and said that he should thank her more properly. He is grateful to her for always supporting and standing by his side in every mission. Mora, confused by such sincere thanks, hastily added about himself, claiming to be one of the top 5 support magicians in the capital. Sharina walked in and saw that Gale had just completed a cursed item, and this time it looked really impressive, even though Gale herself thought otherwise. She asked how to use this cursed tool, and Gale explained that just turn the knob on it, and immediately the petrification beam will be emitted. Gale tried firing a petrification beam right above Sharina's head to demonstrate, causing her to almost faint from fear. He wasn't sure whether this item would be popular or not, but Sharina explained that the petrification gun was actually a functional design that met the needs of the people of Farm Edge. Somehow, Sharina pulled out a whiteboard from nowhere and told Gale to recall that the surrounding area was mainly grasslands, mountains, and forests, so they had difficulty needing rocks. After an hour-long lecture about supply and demand, she suggested that it would be convenient to have a machine that produced venom to treat insects and pests. To Sharina's surprise, Gale calmly revealed that he could create that if she wanted. The only problem is that the materials for making it are quite rare, but here Gimli can help. Happy to have another order, Gale immediately got to work. Meanwhile, Sharina took the petrification gun to test its abilities. simultaneously, admitted to Mora that she was happy that they both felt comfortable here. Meanwhile, on the Wolfpack side, Liznet and her team of assassins asked Cash for permission to join the group. As they prepared to depart on the carriage to the farming city, Cash was so drunk that he no longer knew what heaven and earth were and laughed happily. He and his group happily shopped as they pleased from the stores with the bill paid by the palace. Cash bought himself a mithril sword worth up to 500 gold coins, while others also acquired items such as a wyvern bone dagger, a new grimoire and a set of armor made from the hide of a magical beast. Cash is now confident that it doesn't matter whether he is cursed by Gale or not, because with this equipment, he believes he can face anything. The other assassins, now taking on the role of adventurers in the group, began to get tired of hearing their meaningless boasts. Cash looked at Liznet with disdain and called her a gloomy woman, asking what she and her team planned to do on this mission. Liznet smiled wryly, explaining that her role was as rear support in the S-rank team, the Wolfpack, to provide buffs and nerfs to enemies. She added that she and her teammates would be in charge of carrying equipment and supplies. Cash laughed and declared that he hired them exactly to do those things and that they had best follow instructions. Cash felt sorry for them when he had to take them with him to the agricultural city, and expected endless gratitude from them. Liznet forced a smile while angry, with the intention of killing Cash as soon as the mission was completed. Everything from lavish food to drinks to other items are included in Princess Carla's bill, so Cash simply enjoys it as much as possible. Liznet reminds Cash of his second mission to escort the convoy to the village of Farm Edge and advises everyone not to drink too much until they arrive. Proper and stupid could be Cash's middle names, so he immediately tells Liznet to be quiet and mocks her gloomy face, which he says even the taste of the wine is spoiled by her expression. That face. Liznet's anger only grew from Cash's taunts, but there wasn't much she could do since they were having to rely on Cash for the time being. She is upset with the fact that assassins usually don't have much money because they have to spend a lot to go to faraway places and gather information for the royal court. The other assassins were also upset because Cash had no intention of sharing food with them. At that moment, the driver blew the siren, warning everyone of the danger. Liznet and the other assassins on the vehicle immediately understood the signal and quickly walked out to check the situation. The driver warned everyone about the monsters appearing around them and everyone quickly took position to protect the convoy. Even though they could sense the monsters, they still couldn't see them anywhere. Suddenly, the ground in the forest began to shake as the sounds of monsters rushing surrounded the area. An alliance of monsters of all kinds ambushed the convoy. The mercenaries asked everyone to stay calm and put their trust in the escort team, but the number of monsters is too large, and they quickly crushed one of the carts like a leaf. The monsters are getting closer and closer. A cow-like monster with large horns, full of power and magic. This monster is feared by many people because it is an S-class monster, never appearing on normal roads. While the assassins are thinking about what to do next, Liznet reminds everyone that they only specialize in dealing with humans, not monsters. Mercenaries are being taken down one by monsters, including the mighty behemoths. The Monster Alliance also includes many other formidable opponents such as B-rank or higher killer wolves and a giant wild boar. The assassins started thinking about running away, but even more desperate when seeing these useless S-rankers still drunk in broad daylight. Completely unaware of the situation, Liznet was informed that there was an S-rank quest to defeat these monsters, but when a group of S-ranks accepted it, they ran away before completing it. She felt angry when she heard about the existence of such stupid S-rankers, but then quickly realized that those S-rankers lack brains, none other than the Black Wolves. Liznet wonders if these people are capable of taking down Behemoth. Deciding to speak out to Cash and his group to urge them to fight, she only received a disdainful look from Cash, who called her a weird woman, and ignored what she said. This made Liznet so angry that she had to be held back by her teammates so she wouldn't kill Cash on the spot. Hopefully the author doesn't intend to keep these useless S-rankers alive, otherwise they will have to meet them in every chapter. Meanwhile, Luke and Norris hear noises outside, and called out to the carriage driver, but no one responded. At that moment, the giant behemoth roared loudly, causing the whole group to stiffen in fear. A shiver ran down their spines. Liznet quickly realized that the recent attack by the orcs, perhaps because they were driven from their territory by this fearsome behemoth. She could easily see that this behemoth was dominant, aggressive, and overwhelming. The beast looked straight into each person's eyes, as if showing them the death that awaited. Cash just trembled, collapsed and couldn't move because of fear. The behemoth rammed the carriage, destroying it in a single blow, and the group was thrown out, flung in every direction like marbles being played with by children. The assassins luckily landed safely, while Cash and the others fell to the ground in a very humorous position, their buttocks in the air. Liznet told the wolf pack to play their true role as S-rankers and proactively attack. Behemoth roared loudly, creating such pressure that the surrounding air cracked, causing everyone to freeze in fear. Liznet reminded them that destroying Behemoth was their mission from the beginning. Cash and his team were surprised when she learned this. But for the sake of dignity, they decided to stand up straight in front of Behemoth to show their S-rank confidence. The surrounding passengers cheered for the wolf pack. And even Liznet began to have some hope, as if heroic music was playing in the background. Her eyes lit up, longing to witness the true power of an S-rank team. However, when Behemoth rushed in with tremendous speed, in a single blow, it easily defeated the entire Wolfpack group, causing all hope to be extinguished. What's worse is that, right after that, the Wolfpack group immediately fled the battlefield. Liznet can't let herself fail here, because every failure is a sign of death for her. When the image of burial with a sinister smile appeared in her mind, the other assassins were prepared to attack and retreat. So now they have to bear the responsibility of the cowardly Wolfpack members who escaped, bravely standing before a group of high-level monsters. Liznet decided to lure Behemoth. Despite being an experienced assassin, her initial ambush strategy failed, when Behemoth quickly detected and counterattacked, forcing her to change tactics. Deciding to confront her head-on, Liznet uses Melissa's wyvern knife, a deadly weapon. She threw an ordinary knife as a distraction, but Behemoth immediately blocked it. Take advantage of the moment when the monster loses track. She charged in with the wyvern knife, aiming straight for the weak spots. Although the first attack was repelled, Liznet quickly dodged Behemoth's stomp and aim at my eyes, its weakness. Her fatal blow seemed to have completed her mission. But it turns out Behemoth is resistant to poison. She was forced to use the last resort to end the battle using the item she received from Prince Burial, a piece of the Demon King's heart. Prince Burial once asserted that this fragment could make Liznet's flesh and bones become so strong that she would become the reincarnation of the Demon King. Meanwhile, in the capital, inside the palace, Princess Carla is being taught tea ceremony etiquette by Lady Melinda, who didn't look like she had any manners. After that, Carla sat in the room, look at the bird sitting on the tree outside the window, and wonders if the curse maker, Gale, can remove the curse that imprisons her, let her live a free life or not. She looked out at the vast sky and felt imprisoned in her own life. Then, she called Vivian in and asked about the Demon King's heart. Vivian explains that it is a kind of legend, or folk tale, that has been passed down through generations. Carla thought it was just a fairy tale, but Vivian said there was a strong possibility that it was true, and the Demon King's heart are considered cursed items, and the scariest of all things that exist in this world. Back to the battle between Liznet and Behemoth. Liznet has completely lost hope and ready to be devoured. At that moment, one of her teammates threw a stun grenade, causing Behemoth to loosen his grip and release Liznet. She quickly put on the cursed bracelet, containing the power of the Demon King, and placed his hands on the beast's tail, ripping it off with his bare hands. Behemoth rushed towards her comrades, but Liznet stops it by grabbing its horns. This power helps her turn the tide of battle, but at the same time drains her vitality. In that moment, Liznet looked like a completely different person, with eye color turning dark red. She lifted Behemoth into the air, then hit the ground hard. The other monsters were scared when they saw their leader cornered. She laughed, showing overwhelming strength, causing the monsters to run away in panic. However, Liznet's teammates couldn't help but think that she was the one who looked more like a monster now. Suddenly, she began coughing up blood, and assassins rushed to her aid. One of them arrived promptly, along with a curse charm from the church to help Liznet escape the curse. They quickly cast the talisman on the cursed bracelet, slowly removed the bracelet from Liznet's hand. She giggled when she realized that they had been through a lot but still survived in the end. While the S-rank adventurer group did nothing. In the end, Liznet vented all her anger towards Gale. Meanwhile, at the agricultural city's blacksmithing guild, Gale sneezed continuously. And wonder who is thinking about me right now. He successfully created many useful cursed items for Sharina in a short period of time. Although all very useful, Sharina and Mora still couldn't help but complain about their lack of aesthetics. Sharina asked Gale if he was going to see the land, but Gale didn't understand what she meant. Should ask again. Sharina explained that there was a perfect piece of land located on a street just a block from the central fair. Gale was excited, thinking that the place would become his store, while Sharina commented that it was very much in line with what he wanted from a pawn shop. She added that the shop was originally an empty shop used by an alchemist to sell tools. Additionally, Sharina said with the money they earned from the cursed tools they sold, they could easily pay the deposit. Mora happily told Gale that this was the perfect location. Sharina added that once they clean and reorganize, This space will become the ultimate Gale store. However, Sharina has many other plans for the store. She planned to issue a notice allowing Gale to freely use the guild's smithy and other facilities, ensuring he had everything he needed for the job. If there were such wonderful and kind store managers in the real world, how nice. Elsewhere, a weaving convoy has been traveling for 10 days, continuing to advance despite a recent behemoth attack. The convoy, consisting of many freight cars, was heading towards the agricultural city. Unfortunately, half of the carriages were damaged in the attack. The positive point is that they were rescued by a patrol team along the road, helping them continue their journey to the agricultural city. However, the story has an interesting twist. It is said that Cash and his mischievous group stopped the monster force led by the behemoth. Cash was extremely excited, enjoying the stories of his bravery and exploits, feeling like a king being fed grapes by his maid. And of course, he loved being praised by the mercenaries. It made him feel special. His whole team was equally excited, thinking they would receive many rewards for their efforts. The members quickly responded, asserting that they too had worked hard and deserved praise. That's right, who doesn't love rewards? However, Liznette showed sarcasm. She pretended to praise the other members, but actually didn't like them. Liznette said that she truly recognized their efforts, but in her heart she could not forget that she did not receive any help from them, which made her even more upset. Liznette's sarcastic comments reveal the tension within the group. Even though the group is celebrating their victory and talking about rewards, there are still hidden conflicts. They're all vying for credit for something they didn't actually do, and no one can even remember how it happened in the first place. After being defeated by the behemoth, it was true, the behemoth gave them a terrible defeat. But still, they claim to have cut off its tail and injured its eyes with sharp horns. Even though they were actually unconscious throughout the fight. Looks like someone's on a delirious roller coaster. Although everyone saw blood on Melissa's knife, which she used to gouge out the behemoth's eyes, Cash insisted that the cut was on the tail, caused by his mithril greatsword. He declared in front of everyone that he could feel the power to cut through everything easily with this sword. However, only a few people actually witnessed what happened. The assassins remained unharmed, because others were injured in the ambush. Liznette just sat quietly, watching all this arguing about trivial matters. They were no different than 5-year-olds. She even pointed out that there was not a single trace of blood on Cash's mithril greatsword. The Wolfpack member woke up, Liznette recalled. After it was all over, there was no trace of the monster as the convoy continued to move forward. They discovered an eye lying on the ground, and nearby was Melissa's knife. And the behemoth horn. Cash tries to understand what happened and quickly concludes that it was the assassins who repelled the behemoth, while they just stood there watching. Liznette, who actually took down the monster, refused to take credit, saying it would only hinder their mission. She believes that assassins should not stand out, because it can bring danger to them. Upon arriving at the agricultural city of Farm Edge, the passengers thank the Wolfpack for helping escort them safely. So the Wolfpack group is honored as saviors, great adventurers that everyone admires. But wait, what about the assassins? They sat in the dark, feeling forgotten in the glorious party. In fact, they were the ones who actually cleaned up the behemoth. Let's talk about anonymous work, like bringing snacks to movie night that no one even notices. Let's give a round of applause to our unsung heroes. Cash steps up and makes plans for what's to come. They decided to rest, relax, and maybe get a little naughty. But before I can relax, Liznette noticed their mischief and offered to go to the Adventurers Guild to exchange the behemoth's parts for money. Luke agreed, thinking it was a good idea, especially since some shady people might try to steal the loot if they weren't careful. This is where things get interesting. Cash notices something strange about this town. Street lamp posts are decorated with skeletons, not at all like normal decorations. Norris and Luke agree, but strangely no one else seemed to notice it. Norris suggests that this may be the work of Gale and his curse tools. Luke and Melissa were skeptical at first, but then the idea suddenly hit them like a ton of bricks. Gale must have been busy creating these monstrosities on her own. Cash, always sharp, pieces together the clues and thinks there might be a curse tool shop hidden somewhere around here. Gale may have stopped by the Adventurers Guild, but the story doesn't stop there. Liznette's sophisticated games have really yielded big results. When the group decided to change their plans and go to the Adventurers Guild. True Liznette style, always one step ahead. Meanwhile, another assassin speculated that Gale probably did not trust these wolf packs, thinking that Gale was using them as a cover while he secretly developed his talent for creating artifacts. Well, who will be the one to tell him the truth? Finally, the group entered the Adventurers Guild, ready to cash in on their supposedly hard-earned loot. As soon as I entered, they couldn't help but be amazed by the classic design of this place, as if they had just returned to ancient times. Norris quickly realized that there were no valuable quests worth posting, But today they weren't here for the quest. With his usual arrogant demeanor, Cash spotted the reception desk and walked over, ready to start a conversation with someone he thinks is just an ordinary employee. But he didn't know that the person he was talking to was actually Gimli himself, the president of the Adventurers Guild. Cash, in his usual boastful style, started talking about his S-rank team, the Wolfpack, and told Liznet to bring the parts of the behemoth they defeated, like horns, tail and one eye. Gimli looked over these items and asked if this was all. Cash, like a great hero, insisted that they deserved a valuable reward, because anyone can see that these are the parts of a behemoth. Norris added that they were able to obtain high-value alchemy materials in the capital. Gimli smiled and said that they needed to bring the behemoth's head or heart as proof, not just these few scraps. Realizing that nothing would come of it, Cash and his companions left the guild in anger. Gimli happily told them to come back with the whole beast next time. What a strong slap to their pride. As they left, Gimli suddenly asked which group Liznet belonged to, hinting that she knew the truth. Liznet and her team, the ones who actually took down Behemoth, quickly realized that Gimli was a high-level expert in the profession, and decided they needed to leave town quickly. Meanwhile, at Gale's soon-to-open curse store, things are going well. Gale has finished decorating, and Sharina, his right-hand woman, gives her honest opinion, commenting that the store seems bland but suits his personality. The shop is decorated with large teeth and bones, looking like an ancient cave. Sharina reassures Gale that he can still accept quests from the guild and that she will help him manage the store. Just as they were about to celebrate the completion of their work, Mora appears, seemed impressed with the store and offered to help with preparations. Gale, with gratitude, promised to visit the Blacksmiths Guild often. He wanted to run the store, but also wanted to continue being an adventurer. However, he didn't have enough money to hire a manager, so Mora offered to take turns with him. Gale, the naive guy as usual, didn't notice Mora's subtle confession of love, but focused on his cursed items. When night falls, Gale heard the doorbell ring. Oh no, trouble is coming? Cash and the Wolfpack rushed into Gale's shop, accusing him of making them suffer with curses and demanding that he remove them immediately. Gale was surprised and confused when she realized they were talking about the charms he had placed on their equipment. He was completely surprised by the accusations, because he had gone through many difficulties to maintain those spells. Outside, Liznet and a group of assassins secretly watched, found the situation humorous and saw this as an opportunity to evaluate Gale's strength. Inside, Cash and his accomplices became increasingly aggressive. Gale remembered the hardships he had endured because of them. A feeling of anger flared up when he remembered how they had called him useless and chased him away. Yet now they blame him for their troubles. Cash was extremely angry. Believes that Gale has cursed him and his teammates. He didn't believe Gale's words when he denied placing the curse on them. Cash gets even angrier and confesses that he intentionally destroyed Gale's curse tools out of hatred. Even broke a precious item, a mummy. Clearly, Cash needs an anger management class urgently. Melissa asks why Gale's hideous item is so important. Gale became angrier, and Luke decided to cause trouble by throwing knives at curse tools, breaking display shelves. Norris added to the chaos by casting a fire spell, causing Gale to beg them to stop before burning down the entire store. Cash grabbed Gale's collar, demanding he lift the curse. Gale confirmed that their stats had returned to normal and there wasn't any curse at all. But Cash didn't believe it, insisting that it was impossible for them to be that weak. Angry, Cash declares that the only way to break the curse is to kill Gale. What an extreme action. Gale, now also extremely angry, punched Cash in the face. Boom! Cash flew out of the store. Gale was surprised by his strength, but hey, small spaces make him punch fast. Outside, Liznet and the assassins saw Cash being thrown away. Gale not only protected himself, but also the kind people who welcomed him at Farm Edge. He declared that he would resolve everything outside. The 1-on-4 match begins. Gale takes on the Wolfpack. Liznet and her group of assassins have their own plans to kidnap Gale, but for now, they just observe? See everything happening as you want. She thought to herself that the Wolfpack were really useful idiots. Cash, Melissa and Norris prepare to fight Gale in earnest. They boast about spending a lot of money on power-ups. Cash pulled out the energy-boosting potions, and the whole group drank them. Glows like in a video game. Their stats increased, ready to confront Gale. Gale was surprised to see the genuine enhancement items that Wolfpack was using. Even displays enhanced stats. Cash proudly bragged about their enhancements, saying that Gale would never have something as genuine as that. He claims the group has returned to their original strength, despite the fact that they were never that strong. Without listening to Gale's explanation, they rushed to attack according to the typical Wolfpack tactics. Norris said that Gale would not understand this tactic, as he had never used it before. In essence, their strategy is very simple: surround a target and attack from all sides. Gale remembered this silly tactic from her time in the group. Cash was the main attacker, so Gale focused on him, but Melissa struck first. Gale dodged it thanks to her quick reflexes. But she got stronger thanks to the enhancing medicine. Next is Luke with the poisoned knives. Gale rolled to avoid it. And Luke threatened to pierce him next time. Gale knew Luke was dangerous with his poisonous knives. Cash then charges, but Gale dodges again. Cash was stunned when he realized that Gale could predict his movements. However, Gale's biggest worry is Norris's fire magic. Even if he dodged it, the town could still burn up. Cash, Melissa and Luke cut off all escape routes for Gale, determined to trap him. But surprise, Gale has a plan. He pulled out the scroll. Curse tools. Gale was not only dodging the attack, but also luring the entire wolf pack into a trap. He knew they used strengthening items, so he needed to weaken them with curse tools. Gale challenged them to take a hit from these tools and Gale used the scrolls at just the right time, when everyone was in range. The chessboard has turned upside down. Gale may be outnumbered, but he still has special curse moves up his sleeve. He took out his special curse tool, called the Curse of Pain. As soon as the Curse of Grief started working, Cash and the group immediately felt its effects. Gale explains that this tool was made from the ashes of a wrongfully executed prisoner, containing a lifetime of resentment and suffering. Gale recalls the first time he discovered this cursed energy when he was exploring an ancient ruin. There, he saw a soul that could not escape, trapped in a wall, full of anger and sadness. Gale felt sorry for that soul. So I used the spell to remove the curse to free it. That soul was extremely grateful, even shedding tears of relief before disappearing peacefully. This experience inspired Gale to create that curse tool. Returning to the battle, Gale learned that the Curse of Grief might not be as strong as the wolf pack's buffs, but it could at least slow them down. And as expected, it worked. Cash and his accomplices immediately felt heavy and significantly weaker despite taking strength-enhancing drugs. Cash tries to ignore it, saying that Gale's curse tool won't have any effect. But Gale has a plan. He started running, lead the wolf pack out of town to avoid harming civilians. Gale aimed for the underground cemetery, thinking that the terrain there would give him an advantage. While looking back, Gale saw 4 shadows still chasing him. Back to the store. Cash and his group are still trapped by the effects of the curse tool. Cash's group was amazed at the power of the curses that Gale created, far beyond what they had imagined. Before Gale started running, Liznette realized that he was the creator of the real artifacts. She becomes curious about the number of antiques that Gale may possess. The other assassins ask Liznette what to do next, as the villagers are starting to notice the commotion. Hearing the footsteps of the guards, Liznette felt a strange heaviness, suspecting that this might be an influence from the Demon King's heart. Realizing the risky situation, she ordered an immediate retreat, because she herself was feeling the effects of Gale's curse tool. The tool's area of effect was larger than she expected and its power overwhelmed Liznette. Gradually weakening by the second, Liznette decided to withdraw her troops. And the assassins were surprised because they did not expect the power of Gale's curse to be so terrible. Far beyond all their preparations, trying to escape the black light of the curse tool, Liznette notices Gale running away. She wondered why he ran away after weakening them so much. Knowing there was not much time left, Liznette ordered the group to pursue Gale. They worry about Gale's proficiency in using the cursed artifact, thinks he is a dangerous and scheming opponent. As Gale ran toward the suburbs, Liznette thought he was stupid for choosing a cemetery, where an assassin like her could take advantage of the darkness to attack. But the pursuit suddenly changed direction. When the assassins start to become exhausted, it becomes difficult to keep up. They thought Gale was taking a speed-boosting drug, but then realized they were under the influence of his curse. Desperate to capture him, Liznette orders the group to capture or destroy Gale at all costs. Too focused on the task, they do not pay attention to the ominous signs around them. As they rushed forward in their enthusiasm, they accidentally awakened the legendary monster Behemoth, a terrifying and gigantic S-class monster, threatening like a dark cloud over the town of Farm Edge. You know the situation is tense when you see locals hastily locking their doors and hiding under their beds. Meanwhile, Cash and his accomplices were stuck, like turtles turned upside down, thanks to Gale's curse tool. Mora appeared after hearing the commotion, ready for a battle. Cash recognized her immediately and couldn't believe Mora was at Farm Edge. The whole group was overwhelmed by her beauty but couldn't hide their discomfort. Cash recalls Gale's deportation, and thought about Mora's alleged betrayal, causing Norris to quickly jump in, and came to an absurd conclusion. Norris confidently believes that Moca and Gale have been plotting together for a long time and is proud that he has exposed this secret. But Moca just shook her head at his stupidity. She tried to explain but no one would listen. Norris, because he was too proud, even insulted her, made Moca really angry. Moca sarcastically said that there was no way she was as involved with Gale as they imagined. Cash asks her to explain why she is here, but seeing there was no point in telling the truth, Moca had no choice but to sarcasm by agreeing with their absurd deductions. She then challenged them, asking what she had done to the point that they had to go to the countryside only to vandalize Gale's store and treat her own group members so badly. Cash is scared when he remembers the time Moca defeated them all in a bar brawl and realizes that now, with the power of Gale's curse, they are even weaker than before. Moca taunts them for going to the trouble of marching to this rural town just to cause trouble and make themselves more miserable. Determined to teach them a lesson, Cash desperately tried to use the wolf pack's tactics, but now they were too slow and weak. Moca easily blocked Cash's attack and taunted him for attempting his weak Rain of Slashes move. Then she showed him what is a real slashing attack. Used his bare hands to punch Cash until he fainted. Melissa tried to sneak attack Moca from behind, but she quickly counterattacked, punched Melissa hard in the face, to the point that her nose was bleeding like a broken faucet. This was truly a one-sided fight. Moca wasn't one to back down from a challenge, but she also didn't want to fight with the weight of Gale's curse weighing down on her opponent, making the match feel like a game of tag with 4 children. She was almost dancing around them. But wait, Luke and Norris haven't given up yet. Poor thing, they were trying to talk tough, threatening Moca with their knives and little magic tricks. Looking at them, it was like puppies barking at an adult wolf. You almost want to pat them on the head and say, "Come on, kids." Luke tried to throw knives like he was a ninja warrior, but Moca didn't break a sweat. With her muscles bulging like a bodybuilder, she dodged the knives with ease, as if she were jumping rope in the park. It was so easy for her. Moca got serious, ready to show Luke and Norris who owned the place. With just a shake of her wrist and a cold look, she prepared to teach them an unforgettable lesson. Now only the last 2 members of the wolf pack remain, Luke and Norris. If anyone needs a lesson in what not to do in a match with a girl who just beat all your friends, then Luke and Norris are prime examples. Before Luke could think of anything else, when he looked up, all he saw was Moca's fist coming straight at his face in slow motion. With an unforgiving punch, Moca sent Luke flying backwards. Only Norris remained, who took the time to chant the spell he was confident about. Will be a deadly hell shot. But contrary to the powerful name, when Norris cast his magic, only a small spark erupted. Without hesitation, Moca immediately threw the bottle of wine she brought to celebrate the store's opening in Norris's face. The wine bottle shattered, causing him to fall to his knees. Moca was victorious, giving Gale much-deserved revenge for what they had done to him. While she was unscathed, the wolf pack looked like they had just participated in World War III. Cash knelt down, clasped his hands and asked Moca for forgiveness. It's right that the team name should be changed from the wolf pack to the chicken pack, even though this might offend the chickens. After cleaning them up, Moca suddenly wondered where Gale was. She noticed a few villagers gathered on the street in front of the store and went over to take a look. What she saw stunned her. All the items were broken, including the mummy that Gale spent so much effort creating, his mainstay. Reminisce about your smile when admiring this precious item. Moca realized that although she had previously been annoyed by his obsession with these creepy objects, but now she feels sad and angry when she sees it destroyed. As he was about to leave the store to deal with Cash's group to vent their anger, Sharina suddenly appeared with a bunch of drinks in her hand. The scene in the store shocked her beyond words. She asked Moca what happened. Moca responded that she needed to find Gale first. Sharina stops her and asks to explain everything. However, Moca couldn't think straight, her words were jumbled and confusing. Sharina then asked if she knew where Gale could have gone. Moca replied that he was not someone who could be easily defeated by someone like Cash, so he must have tried to lead them out of town to avoid causing trouble for the people here. Gimli interrupts their conversation to say that Gale has gone towards the ruins of the old nursing home. She leaned her back against the wall, smiling comfortably. Moca and Sharina were surprised and didn't understand why Gimli knew about this, and she just said it was just a coincidence. Gimli also said she came here to deal with the stupid wolf pack and the organic trash they brought with them. She also reveals to Moca and Sharina that there is a group following Cash. Hearing that, Moca was extremely worried about Gale and immediately turned around to prepare to find him. Gimli stopped her and asked if she was really going out in her current dress. Moca declared that she didn't have time to go back and change in this dire situation. Sharina also joined her, took Cash's mithril sword and gave Moca a dagger. Is better than nothing. They prepared with their makeshift weapons and quickly set out on a special mission to rescue Gale Hamilton. Seeing their determined spirit, Gimli took on the responsibility of leading the way, emphasizing that every moment is precious in a situation like this. Gimli also said that she felt that something bad was waiting for them ahead. Mora asked Gimli if she was talking about the Wolfpack's followers, and Gimli replied that yes, but she also sensed a non-human presence nearby. Gimli reveals that the organic waste in front of him actually belongs to Behemoth. Just hearing the name is enough to make them feel terrible pressure. Behemoth is a dangerous, disaster-level species. She further explains that the Wolfpack's companions injured the Behemoth, but it escaped. However, now that they're here, the beast may have followed their trail to seek revenge. Mora and Sharina are frightened by the news of the beast, and Sharina emphasizes that if they encounter it now, the difficulty of the mission will escalate to AA level. Meanwhile, Gale stopped after arriving at a graveyard. Liznette and the other assassins emerged from the bushes, looking extremely tired and uncomfortable. They begged Gale to stop for a moment to breathe. He quickly realized that he had seen these people somewhere before. Gale remembered that they were the people with cash, standing outside the shop earlier. Surprisingly, Liznette screamed in denial, asserting that they were in no way the accomplices of bad guys like the Wolfpack. The screaming voice made her throat dry. And Gale, in a gallant spirit, immediately gave her a bottle of medicine to drink because there was no water around. Liznette quickly took it and drank it all in one gulp, then asked Gale what it was because it smelled quite bad. Gale smiled proudly, explaining that she had just tested a petrifying drug, which he prepared from the liquid waste of cockatrice. After hearing that, Liznette definitely wished she had a time machine. Water began to flow from her nose and mouth, and she was angry, threw the vial back at Gale. Who doesn't wonder why a person who hears another person is thirsty immediately responds with, "A monster glass of water." The other assassins also reminded Liznette that she was partly at fault for not checking before drinking, even though she was a skilled assassin. Gale reassured her that it wasn't a big deal, because medicine usually tastes bitter. This made Liznette hate him even more. She immediately pulled out her knife and ordered everyone to arrest Gale immediately. The others also drew their weapons, while Gale was still trying to put the pieces of events together to understand the situation. He tried to explain everything, but Liznette just bluntly said that she didn't care whether he lived or died. "Just want to make sure you can't leave here safely." Gale scratched her head in confusion, thinking that the potion must have been bad enough to make her so angry. Liznette rushed to attack Gale with the dagger, aimed at him with the intention of directly killing him. But he dodged all her attacks. When she ordered the assassins to attack at the same time, somehow, Gale still evaded all of their attacks. He was amused by the confused expressions on their faces and told them to look down at the ground, where bone fragments and human skulls were scattered everywhere. He himself used them to disperse assassins. Every time they stepped on debris or bones, he could easily locate them and dodge attacks. Liznette, angry, wanted to know why he was so skilled at fighting in the cemetery and why he chose this place. It turns out that Gale often comes here to collect ingredients for cursed items. But the reason is bigger than that. This is where he hid his trump card. A place where empty souls still roam is perfect for a curse crafter to reach its full potential. Gale raised his hands, smiled, and informed the assassins that his friends were coming to greet them. Liznette and her teammates secretly worried about an ambush. But the foul smell makes warning bells ring. Something terrible that they could not imagine was gradually appearing before their eyes. Suddenly, the ground began to shake as if the land itself was trembling with fear. From under the tombstones, an army of zombies emerged with decomposed faces. Gale stood in the middle of the death spiral, arms crossed in authority. Perhaps he didn't even realize the true potential of what he had just summoned. Meanwhile, at the palace, Carla's eyes were fixed on Gale's wanted notice. Lying in bed, she wondered if the Wolfpack could bring him back. Vivian entered, leading High Septon Aureli and Lord Elizola to her room and asked them to look into Carla's condition. She asked, how could someone be so infatuated with a man she had only met once? The priest reminded her that that meeting saved her life. Elizola couldn't help but be surprised to learn that in the most dangerous moment of her life, Carla fell in love with Gale. The more Vivian talked, the more frustrated she felt. The priest pointed out that Carla and Gale shared unique interests and values. During the 10 minutes they talked, Carla's eyes never left the humorous sketch of Gale. Elizola smiled and commented that when they can't meet each other, the image of the person they love becomes more idealized. Love filled the air, making Vivian feel melancholy. In the cemetery, the battle with the undead has begun. The creatures' hollow eyes glowed in a macabre manner, and tattered clothing hung from their rotting bodies. Liznette was shocked to realize that the whole time they were chasing Gale, they were the ones being led into a trap. Some walkers are just dry skeletons, while others are hideous zombies with hanging layers of decomposing flesh. They moved closer towards the assassins, and they backed away, terrified by something they could not understand. Liznette swung her dagger at one of the undead and beheaded it. But their spirits are further depressed when ghosts appear from another dimension. Now, they not only fight zombies but also face ghosts. Gale probably didn't realize that he could conquer an entire kingdom with this power. He explained that he knew he would be at a disadvantage if he had to face Cash's group alone. Gale had meticulously planned for this eventuality. And being linked to Cash's group annoyed Liznette more than having to fight the undead. She reminds Gale that they are not the same as the wolf pack, and finally introduced his group as assassins living in the darkness, unfazed by a battle with the undead. As she spoke, Liznette rushed in like a storm, beheading more than 10 zombies in just a few seconds. Gale commented that her skills were impressive, but still not enough to fight his army. Meanwhile, her team members are struggling to protect their blind spots. Liznette quickly ordered them to form a defensive circle to pull Gale inside. The group gradually feels hopeful when they think they can take down Gale. But she still has her trump card. The only problem is that this ace has many limitations, so she is waiting for the right moment to use the cursed ring, containing the Demon King's heart, once all the undead have been destroyed. Liznette smiled confidently, while Gale looked at her with a puzzled expression. However, that smile probably won't last long, because her main card is nothing compared to the strategies that Gale has prepared. Meanwhile, Gimli, Sharina and Mora were running as fast as they could. They know clearly that a group of assassins are targeting Gale, and wanted to quickly arrive at the scene so that the forces could be balanced. Little did they know that Gale was actually a one-man army. The trio begins to realize how important Gale is now that he is no longer around. Sharina shouts his name loudly and asserts that they have many unfulfilled promises, including creating countless cursed tools and bringing the Industrial Revolution to the village of Farmad. Gimli also admitted that she would be in big trouble if he disappeared. The thought of never seeing him again brought tears to Mara's eyes. She promised that the next time she saw him, she would confess everything. Sharina reminds them that there is still a behemoth threat to be wary of. If you encounter both assassins and monsters at the same time, the situation will become extremely difficult. Gimli asserts that if they reach Gale before facing the enemy, they will have a chance of survival. In fact, although cursed tool making is often considered a poor job, if Gale focuses on a specific area, he can awaken unique powers called reverse luck. With this ability, he can reverse any bad luck. It is truly the main character's armor. The only hope to escape this dangerous situation is that Gale will truly awaken that power. Liznette and her group of friends finally wiped out the entire zombie army through their strong will. But now they don't have the strength to take another step. She raised her hands and declared that seeing Gale easily control the undead army had dismayed her. Gale smiled and gently suggested that she give up. Liznette stepped up, held out his hands as if to surrender. As Gale was about to return her handshake, Liznette withdrew her hand, and ordered her teammates to quickly hand over the artifact. Gale's eyes widened in panic. An artifact that enhances all physical abilities, but drains the user's vitality. While Liznette was busy boasting about the power of the cursed item, Gale suddenly interrupted her, clarifying that he was not surprised by the artifact, but by the monster charging from behind her. Liznette froze at the sight of Behemoth, fear written all over her face. She had been patiently waiting for this moment to catch Gale off guard, but unfortunately for her, it was Behemoth who had the upper hand. She realized that she couldn't dodge the monster's attack in time, so she closed her eyes, preparing to accept death. However, Gale is the main character for a good reason. He decided to push Liznette aside to save her instead of avoiding the attack himself. So 1+ point for your harem, if you survive. Gale took the full blow and flew straight into a nearby house. Liznette was sure there was no way he could survive that fall. She should be happy, but this made her more upset. Why did someone she was trying to kill save her? Look at the behemoth. Liznette orders the Demon King's heart to swallow her, preparing for a death match. Meanwhile, Gale, who had just been sent flying, fell through a hole in the roof and landed on a bed. If he had fallen to the ground, he would have suffered irreversible injuries. It seems he has truly mastered the ability of unexpected luck. Gale began to think about the identity of the monster that had just attacked them. After some brainstorming, he concluded that it must be an undead beast that Sharina often complained about destroying farms. I really don't understand why he's so stupid. He must have fallen headfirst into the ground when he was a child, or his mind has become one with a black hole from outer space. There is no more reasonable explanation. Decides that he must return to the battlefield to help Liznette and her group, who just tried to kill him a few seconds ago. Gale quickly realized that he had fallen too far, and was seriously disoriented. Gale, not sure if she'll get there in time to help Liznette. The behemoth only had one eye, one horn, and half its tail. Yet Liznet still struggles to fight it. Even though she possesses the power of the Demon King, she still has difficulty facing the monster's terrifying power. The battle was so intense that her assassin friends only dared to watch from afar. One of Liznet's teammates suggested that she change weapons, but she insisted that she could tear off the monster's head herself. Unlike Gale, luck was not on her side. Liznet started coughing up blood and collapsed to the ground. Her assassin friends rush over to help, and one finds that the curse is starting to eat away at her heart. Each power-enhancing effect gradually fades away as the curse takes hold. Two people in the group try to approach the behemoth to distract it, while the other one tries to find a way to lift the curse on Liznet. Unfortunately, their strength was not enough to confront the behemoth. Just one blow of it was enough to send them flying into the air, blood spurting from their mouths. After dealing with the troublemakers, the behemoth turned around, its fierce eyes aimed straight at Liznet and rushed towards her. Liznet tried to order her companion to quickly lift the curse, but unfortunately, even the church's most advanced dispelling item had no effect. She only lost consciousness for a moment and then regained consciousness. Her killer instinct has trained her not to fall, but this means she has to endure all the pain tormenting her body. Just when she thought the situation couldn't get any worse, fate dealt her another blow. A dark entity attracted by the piles of undead piled on the ground. The sky suddenly turned black, and a mysterious figure appeared. The one with the giant scythe. None other than the god of death, Shinigami. The situation had gone beyond expectations, and the atmosphere seemed to be filled with extreme fear. Just as Shinigami's voice has put terrible pressure on everyone. Even the fierce behemoth was frozen into terror. Even the fragments of the Demon King's heart inside Liznet stopped beating. And death returns. Pay attention to the dark aura radiating from her. Meanwhile, Liznet is calculating her chances of survival. She realized that her soul could be taken by a scythe. The curse will take over her heart, or she will be torn apart by the behemoth. No matter what you do, the outcome is still death. Death summons a mirror, and ordered Liznet to reflect on her life. She said that she was born into a poor family, and must serve the aristocracy. She was once jealous of the luxurious lives of noble ladies and gentlemen. Hates mistreatment, should flee, and strayed onto the path of assassins. She smiled bitterly, saying that perhaps this was retribution, because she was the one who took the lives of others and now she had to pay the price. Death asked her about the future she wanted. As silly as it sounds, Liznet confesses that she hopes to one day give up the life of an assassin and escape to the village of Farm Edge, hoping someone will accept her without asking anything. When she finished speaking, Death laughed coldly, revealing that he was only joking, that such a thing would never happen. Then he swung the scythe at her while Liznet stared in disbelief. In the midst of that dark scene, all we can do is look forward to our main character, the only person who can destroy the behemoth, defeat the god of death, and lift the curse on Liznet. Only thing is, no one knows where he is.